hated this place. She hated all that had been lost to her because of Prince Roriger and King Ace. Oberyn looked to her, keenly studying her tears. "I hate this place," she said, trembling. His laughter was dark. "That is why I wanted you to accompany me. We share our ghosts here." He held out his hand to her and she accepted, walking hand in hand with him to the dinner. The Queen's Hall had little changed since Ashura Dane last set foot inside the room. The light of the high-hung candelabras shone off of the silver mirrors on the ceiling, illuminating the room in a warm glow. She and Prince Oberyn were not the first to arrive. A small number of guests were milling around the room, talking with one another. No one announced their entrance, but the servant at the door told them that the king had yet to arrive. The Princess Arianne noticed their arrival first. She excused herself from the man with whom she was laughing and walked to them, her red gown fluttering as she moved. "Uncle," Lady Ashura Arianne said, her tone warning. "I am uncertain that your presence here is proper this evening, my lady." "She is the eldest daughter of one of our most noble houses," Oberyn replied quickly. "And her son has saved the king's life." Arianne narrowed her eyes at Oberyn. "Did you tell her that the hand of the king and his wife are in attendance?" Ashura scarcely caught the smirk on Oberyn's lips when she felt herself grow cold. She took a step back, but was met by an arm holding her at the small of her back. "You knew?" "Of course I knew," he replied. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ashura hissed. "You didn't ask. Nor did you consider that the hand would obviously attend the welcome dinner for the future queen." He dismissed Arianne's protests by greeting her with a kiss before continuing. "No one will speak a word about her presence. The king may praise her for Jon saving his life. And Lord and Lady Stark and Lady Ashura will be subject to many inquiring looks," Arianne rebutted, visibly displeased. "I am accustomed to withering glances," my Lady Ashura said with forced calm. "I assure you, none shall find cause to gossip tonight." Oberyn grunted a laugh, but said nothing further. Arianne glared for a moment longer before she shook her head, her many curls swaying at the movement, and turned to the room. Ashura's eyes followed the princess for a few moments before wandering to the crowd. She knew many of the attendees, mainly nobles from Dorne. Arianne was now speaking with her brother and a dark-haired man Ashura didn't know. Her eyes fell upon a different dark-haired man dressed in dark blue who stood beside a red-haired woman in a dark green gown. They were facing away, speaking to nobles Ashura vaguely knew as being from the Reach and Stormlands. She knew at once who stood there. She turned, driven by some instinct to flee, but was met by Oberyn standing firmly in her way. She looked to him, pleading. "Let me leave, before anyone sees." "But where would the fun be in that, my dear? I loathe this place and this company. You can distract me and help me live up to my brother's expectations." She bit her tongue, hard. She was trapped, between duty and her past. "Then get this over with and introduce us," she hissed. He smiled then, and she hated him for it. Did he see her as nothing more than entertainment? No, she knew that was unfair. He was grieving and needed the distraction, though it was at her expense. She did need to speak to Ned again, she had just preferred to wait. Oberyn took her gently by the arm and walked toward the pair Ashura had noticed. One of the men facing them saw their approach. Alisander Stedman was his name, the Lord of Broad Arch in the Stormlands. "Prince Oberyn Martell," he announced. "Who is this enchanting beauty beside you?" The guests he was speaking with turned to face them. She saw Ned's face as he recognized her, first blank, then utterly shocked, before he could rein himself into a more neutral expression. When she saw his wife's face it was froze in some pallid, indescribable, emotion between pain and anger. She could feel Oberyn smile without seeing his face. "Lord Stedman, this is Lady Ashura Dane, of Starfall." Lord Stedman's face turned remarkably blank. He knew her reputation, it would seem. "A pleasure, Lady Ashura," he said, kissing her hand in welcome. "I believe you know, Lord Eddard Stark, the Hand of the King," Oberyn continued. Ned was frozen, his gaze lingering on her for longer than was socially polite. Then he reached for her hand and kissed it. "Lady Ashura," he muttered in welcome. "Lord Stark," she said stiffly. When he released her hand, she curtsied to his wife. "Lady Stark." Lady Stark's greeting was polite, proper. Ashura managed to look at her eyes and saw only a cold mask of formality. Lady Ashura. Silence hung between them, thick and uncomfortable. The group with whom Lord and Lady Stark had been speaking slowly moved themselves away, though some stayed within earshot. Lady Catelyn was the one to break the silence. My daughters spoke very kindly of you and of Dawn. Thank you for caring so well for them in our absence. For a moment, Ashura was struck speechless by Lady Stark's politeness. It was an honor to care for them. Your daughters are both very lovely and were a pleasure to get to know. Though my sister Illyria, Lady Saryn Dondarrion, and Prince Doran Martell were their hosts and your lord husband gave the girls to the care of to my daughter Alysanne. Lady Stark's smile thinned, still polite, though she was clearly unhappy. Yes, they were telling me of their adventures in the south and they spoke well of your children. I must thank you for their gowns, they are lovely. The generosity of Dawn is a pleasure to offer everyone. The girls languished in the heat of dawn, and were aided only by the coolness of our waters and clothes. Ned finally managed to speak. Even so, you have our thanks. You know that I would care well for any of your children, my lord. She spoke evenly, trying to keep her tone neutral. Oberyn snickered briefly at her words, but she paid him no mind, focusing rather on Ned. His hair showed streaks of grey, and lines weathered his face. He was older, but so was she. Have you had a pleasant time with my eldest sons? I have not yet seen Jon since my return. Yes, he replied, a slight smile warming his expression. You have raised them well. Thank you, though I do wish they could have known you better over the years. She heard a sharp breath from more than one person, but met Ned's eyes. He stiffened, as did his wife beside him. His voice was cold when he replied. My duties kept me in the north until I was asked to be Hand of the King. She couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Yes, Ned, duties to your people, your wife, and her children. Yet my children have no need of a father, it seems. She saw his color rise, and found that she little cared for any excuse he might offer. This isn't the place for such a conversation, he growled. Indeed, she replied. I assume we will have many days hence where we may discuss such matters. She turned to Oberyn, smiling with spiteful fervor. Oberyn, I do believe that you have yet to introduce me to so many in this room. He was smiling wickedly at her, proud. Indeed, if you will excuse us, Lord and Lady Stark. It is improper for us to occupy all of your time. Ned glared at Oberyn. You may take your leave. I thank you for your time, Lord and Lady Stark, Ashura replied. Enjoy the feast, Catelyn said, her tone neutral. He guided her from them, his hands warm against her waist. You're trembling, he murmured in her ear. What did you expect, she hissed. I was uncertain, but what I saw was delightful. So glad that I could amuse you, she mocked. Never again use me for your sport. I merely introduced you, the rest is your unresolved anger toward him. She turned to him, they were far enough away from others that they would not be overheard. No more tonight, she asked softly. I do not wish to think upon it. He kissed her brow. I shall antagonize you no more this day. Underscore 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 underscore. Catelyn Stark watched Ashura Dayne walk into the crowd, Prince Oberyn Martell at her side. Much of the fear and anxiety which had built within her at the idea of meeting this woman receded. Ashura Dayne was fair to look upon, to be sure, but she seemed rather changeable, flighty. As Catelyn's shock faded, she began to see the woman with indifference. She looked to Ned and felt herself grow cold as she followed his eyes. He was still watching her, that woman with violet eyes, black hair, and a melodic voice. She had no word of comfort for him nor any word of reproach. In this matter, she left him to his own counsel. However, given that they were leaders at a feast to welcome the future queen, they needed to move from spectacle to sociability with haste. My lord, she said. Shall we speak to more of the guests? He looked to her, distance in his eyes. It is our duty, he said dully. He took her by the arm and they proceeded to speak with more of the guests. She could feel a change in the room, eyes would shift from him to Lady Ashura. The room knew and whispered, eager to gossip about love affairs imagined or real, past or present. Half an hour passed before the herald announced the arrival of the king. Caitlin and Ned made their way to the front of the room, near the three Martells, Sir Garland Tyrell, and Lady Ashura, who was still beside Prince Oberyn. All dipped their knees in welcome to the king. When all arose again, he walked directly to Princess Arianne, and bent to kiss her. First on her hand in the Andal fashion and then both of her cheeks in the Dornish fashion. "Princess Arianne," he said, "I must beg your forgiveness for my absence when you arrived here today. I pray that you will not hold such an oversight against me." She smiled up at him, for more than a foot separated their heights. "Most assuredly, your grace. The business of the realms is of paramount importance." "You are as bright and lovely as I recall, my lady," he replied. "Truly. You seemed terribly disinterested as I recall." "We were young," he laughed. "I hope that I can amend your opinions of me." "I have no doubts that you will." She was smiling broadly, though without any sincerity. She turned aside to her brother. "Please, allow me to introduce my brother, Prince Quentyn." Prince Quentyn Martell and King Renly Baratheon clasped hands and greeted one another. Arianne turned next to Lady Ashura. "May I also introduce you to Lady Ashura Dayne, my principal lady-in-waiting and mother to Jon Sand, who serves in your personal guard." Caitlin could see the recognition pass through Renly's eyes as they flickered from Ashura to Ned to herself before returning to Ashura. He kissed her hand in greeting. "Your son is a credit to you, Lady Ashura." "Thank you, your grace." "You have 4 children, correct?" Caitlin could feel herself stiffen at the king's question. This was not the place to discuss bastards. Lady Ashura smiled, fondness in her features. "Yes, Alysanne, Jon, Arthur, and Lucas. They have all come to King's Landing with me so that we may attend Princess Arianne." "That is splendid. I look forward to meeting the rest." "It would be an honor, my king," she replied. "Well then, I believe that it is well past time to eat. Come, sit beside Prince Oberyn at our table." Ashura's eyes widened in surprise. "I would be honored, your grace." Caitlin breathed deep, forcing herself to remain civil. She did not wish to spend the evening at the same table as Ned's former lover, though it would seem that she had no choice in the matter. They walked together to the head table. The king and his future queen sat together at the head of the table. Her brother to her right, while Sir Garland Tyrell sat to the king's left. Prince Oberyn and Lady Ashura sat beside Princess Arianne and Prince Quentyn, while Caitlin and Ned sat beside Sir Garland. Caitlin's brother Edmure took the seat to her right, for which she was thankful. They spoke on matters of little importance throughout the first course. Caitlin was glad of the meaningless conversation. She was able to ignore the woman who was seated across the table from her for the majority of the meal. As the evening progressed, the conversation changed. Sir Garland, Lady Ashura began, "We heard of the loss of your brother Sir Loras some months ago. You have my condolences." "Thank you, Lady Ashura," he replied. "It is a terrible thing to lose one so beloved." "Indeed," she said. "Losing a brother or any loved one is a difficult thing. My brother died doing one of the things he loved well, fighting for the good of all people." The king smiled tightly, adding his own thoughts into the conversation. "Sir Loras was a good man, and a skilled swordsman. He will be missed, just as dearly as all others whom we have lost or will lose." He forced a lighter expression, and changed the subject. "Lady Ashura, as I contemplate talented swordsmen, I am reminded that your brother Sir Arthur was one of the best swords that Westeros has ever seen. If Jon continues to perform as well as he has been, he may very well grow to be as legendary as his uncle." Caitlin saw Ashura look to Ned briefly before she turned her gaze to the king. "Thank you, your grace," she replied, emotion thick in her voice. "I believe that my brother could think of no greater praise for Jon, if he were here with us." Caitlin felt Ned stiffen beside her as Ashura spoke, and she saw Sir Barristan Selmy shift uncomfortably behind the king at Ashura's words. She wondered what it was in Ashura's words that provoked such discomfort in the two men. She knew that Ned was involved in the battle which saw the death of Sir Arthur Dayne, but she knew nothing else of that fight. Ned never spoke of the war, and truth be told, she had little desire to learn more details of those dark days. Renly raised his glass and his voice. "Let us all drink to those who have fallen in battle, brave souls who bled and died so that our futures will be secure." Caitlin and all the dinner guests raised their cups and drank in honor of the departed. As they drank, Some at the table said names of people who Caitlin could only assume were friends and family who had died in the war. When that was finished, another guest suggested that they drink to King Renly and Princess Arianne. The suggestion was agreed to with cheering from most of the guests. When the cheers quieted and the flagons refilled, Prince Oberyn looked amongst those closest and then to the king. "Shall we drink to the battles to come, your grace?" With a wry smile, Renly sipped his wine. "The war may yet cease. Lord Balon Greyjoy has submitted, and his son shall sit on my council as an advisor. Only my brother remains outside the peace of the realms." Sir Andrew Estermont spoke up from further down the table. "And shall Stannis finally bend the knee?" "Bend the knee?" Lord Yohn Royce laughed. "Stannis Baratheon will never bend, not even when he's lost." Renly seemed pensive while his lords jested. When they quieted, he spoke softly. "No, my brother shall not bend, he has ever been a stubborn fool. I have, however, sent a final plea for reason. If refuses to submit, the fleet will launch for Dragonstone shortly after the wedding and coronation. Sir Garland has already offered to lead the fleet, to which I have heartily agreed." His words were met with shouts of approval, but Caitlin noticed that some of their responses were tepid. Everyone in the room may have sworn themselves to Renly Baratheon's kingship, but putting a third-born son ahead of a second-born son was not a precedent that anyone preferred. Issues of succession could arise in any number of houses due to this, and wars could come from second sons or bastard sons claiming the inheritance which wasn't theirs. Still, Caitlin smiled and applauded with the rest of the crowd. Underscore 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 underscore. Hours passed during the feast. Uncomfortable hours where Ned could feel the tension of his wife radiating from her body. Ned himself had no notion of what he felt seated beside Cat and across from Ashura. Truly there were no words to articulate everything which seeing both women at once evoked within him. Overall, the dinner passed unremarkably. Other than several uncomfortable glances and a few off-colored comments from Prince Oberyn, they dined in peace. Renly and Arianne by the end of the meal were laughing together easily, a good sign for the future of Westeros. When the meal was at an end, Renly stood with his betrothed. "My lords and ladies, Princess Arianne and I shall now retire for the evening. Please, enjoy the rest of the evening and the bounty of this feast." Everyone stood and bowed to them as they made their way from the table and out of the room. They were quite a sight to behold standing side by side, as the top of her head didn't quite reach his shoulders. Shortly after they left, Caitlin turned to him. "I believe that I shall retire for the evening, my lord. Would you like me to escort you back to our rooms?" She forced a small smile. "You do not have to, stay and enjoy the feast if you will." Edmure spoke up from Caitlin's side. "I shall escort Cat back to the Tower of the Hand if you wish to remain." "I would be grateful for that," Edmure Ned replied. "There are some here with whom I wish to speak this evening." His wife's brother gazed at him unhappily, which Ned chose to ignore. Instead, he looked to his wife. "I will come to you later if you wish." The distance in her eyes began to fade and she softened a little at his words. "I would like that, Ned." He reached for her hand, and squeezed it as he kissed her softly. He watched her as she left the feast with Edmure. They were not the only ones to leave at that time, many in the room left for the evening. Ned moved to find the lords with whom he wished to speak, and they spoke on many matters. However, even as he talked to others in the room, he could see Ashura as she stood beside Oberyn. Her words of rebuke still rang in his head, and he knew that he needed to speak with her. Eventually, he walked to where Ashura and Oberyn stood talking with Garland Tyrell and Quentyn Martell. He greeted them all, and after a few moments he looked to Ashura. "Lady Ashura, may we speak?" She looked hesitant at first, but seeing the grin on Oberyn's face, she agreed. "Of course, my lord. If my lords will excuse me." "Of course, my lady," they said. She stepped away from them, glaring briefly at Oberyn as she moved to stand beside Ned. They walked away from the crowds, toward the large porch which ran along one side of the Queen's Hall. "They are watching us," she said as they walked. "I assume that they will do so for as long as you and I live within the castle." "As do I." "Your wife retired for the evening. She did, she was tired. I agree with that sentiment. I am exhausted. I can escort you back to your rooms if you would like. She laughed. Oh Ned, I think it is far too soon for me to be seen alone with you. Not even a day here and already my presence creates gossip. We should discourage that, don't you agree? Of course he startled, he hadn't considered how such an offer could be misconstrued. I was only concerned for your well-being. She smiled at him, gently touching his arm. You are ever the noble gentleman, Ned. They walked outside, onto the porch where the air was cooler. They were alone, though still within view of the other guests. You seem less angry with me than earlier. I have never been angry with you, Ned, only upset in matters regarding the children. He considered her words with some skepticism but did not press the issue. I find myself agreeing with your words earlier. The more time I spend with the boys, the more I find myself wishing that I had sent for them. I always thought you would. Why didn't you? It was easier, he thought. It was easier to avoid the issue altogether. For Caitlin, he said. For a simpler life. Her jaw clenched and she drew her arms around herself. I am sorry, Asher, for everything I have done to you and the children. She took a few steps forward, looking out across the parapet. He walked to stand beside her, but said nothing, waiting for her to speak. What have you done to me, Ned? Have you done anything where I had no choice? I left you alone to raise our children. I was hardly alone, she replied. Illyria and Marissa, the nurses and stewards, Lord Beric, and Oberyn. I was well supported in my endeavors. My children lacked for nothing except you. And you lacked a husband. An old conversation, which I believe we had when last we spoke face to face. I may not have known what the consequences would be when I met you. What is it now, 18 years ago, more or less? But I know now that having Alice saved my life. I would have fought to stay beside Elia to the bitter end if I had not been sent away, and I would have died beside her. Nothing will sway me from that belief, not ever. She spoke passionately, though he could hear the sorrow in her voice. And beside all that, I am not entirely alone, you know of Oberyn and I. I do, though you seem rather at odds with him this evening. She looked back toward the hall, her eyes narrowed. He is fond of uncomfortable situations, such as our reunion. If anything, his daughter's death has only made him testier. Still, I wish that you could have had more. I know you dreamed of a different life. She shook her head, her expression dark. Did you wish to speak with me about your regrets regarding me? I truly do not wish to have that conversation, preferably ever. He breathed deep and slow, feeling a stab of regret again for all he had done. No, I wanted to speak to you about John. His statement seemed to spark some fear within her. What about John? Did you know that he is to be knighted? Visibly relieved, she smiled. Yes, Arthur told me. I am very proud of him, and all that he has gained for himself. Did Arthur tell you that John has been granted land by the king? Her eyes widened, surprised. No, he must have been waiting for John to surprise me with that news. That's wonderful. We were looking over the deeds to the land today. The king may have said that the grant is small, but there are some who name themselves lord with smaller holdings. There is an iron mine in the holdings, farmland, timberlands, and river access. When John is knighted within the next few weeks, the lands will be officially signed over to him, with you as manager of his incomes until he comes of age in a few months. Her eyes shimmered with tears. That's wonderful. There is more, the revenues from the lands are around 5,000 dragons per year. She stared at him, winded, before she found her balance against the parapet. That's enormous. As I said, his yearly revenues will be higher than some lesser lords. Who all knows of this? That John is to be knighted for his valor in battle is well known. That John will be granted something for saving the king's life is also known. However, John and I were only made aware of the amount of his incomes today. The king sees it as a small gift. 5,000 dragons per year is hardly a small gift. It is for Renly Baratheon, even before he became king. She closed her eyes, shaking her head in disbelief. It's more than that, Ned. This income, this land, is safety, a place to call home should Edric choose to remove us from Starfall when he comes of age. She paused, her excitement replaced by fear. But Ned, if anyone learns the truth. No one can, not ever. Even now with him so favored by the king. He studied her thoughtfully, recalling her letter. In your letter you mentioned having a conversation with Alice about John. Does she know? Please Ned, don't ask me to answer that, not here, not now. He ran a hand through his hair, and realized the truth. Why? Why did you tell her? Why? Because my sons were at war, in danger of death, and she asked questions for which I had no answers, and I broke. Now please, let the matter rest, she will say nothing of it. How can you be so certain? Because, unlike you, I know our daughter, she snapped. He turned from her, shaking his head. And do you know how it is for her to hold a secret from the ones she loves most? You and I have held such secrets and know the weight of them. You know what it feels like to hold that within you, having it eat at you. Do you know her enough to believe that she won't tell John? Aghast, she stared at him. I don't know. I will speak with her tomorrow. His response was grave, but a soft smile slowly emerged, easing the hardness of his face. I would like to meet with all of them tomorrow. She smiled back, still rather fretful. I think that is a wonderful idea, Ned. She yawned, resting against the wall again. All of our talking has wearied me further. She gazed distastefully back toward the banquet hall. Please, if you are not angry with me, allow me to escort you back. From what you have said, Oberyn might seek to fray your mood more this evening if he is your escort. Yawning again, she nodded in agreement. He would try to infuriate me if he walked me to my rooms, and our being out here alone for so long likely already has tongues wagging. She smirked at him. Let them talk, for they shall find no basis to their rumors. She turned resolutely and walked with him from the balcony, back into the hall, and then out of the hall toward the entry of Maegor's Holdfast. They spoke little until they were walking through the courtyards which led to their respective chambers. She was the one to break the longest lull in their conversation. Do you remember that statue, she asked as they walked along the serpentine steps. He turned to see the statue to which she was referring, and laughed lightly at the sight. The knight stood tall and proud, with one hand upon a spear and the other hand, missing. I have been living here for nearly a year and yet somehow I have scarcely noticed it. Yes, I do remember. I don't think that anyone else knows why Prince Baelor Breakspear's hand is broken, or that the pieces lie hidden in the bushes. She giggled. Serves me right for trying to walk along the edge of the wall. The prince broke your fall splendidly. And I broke his hand splendidly. Laughing, she shook her head. I don't think that I ever told Elia or even Arthur. Why were you walking along the wall to begin with? I don't believe I ever learned the answer to that question. I believe that I was trying to attract your attention. It had worked. That was the day Ned and Ashura had truly begun speaking, so many years past. He bowed his head solemnly, and let the matter drop, choosing to walk quietly again. Becoming reacquainted with Ashura seemed to be a battle between avoiding pain and anger. She didn't seem to mind the silence, and seemed more at ease beside him. As they walked, she would occasionally lean into him, exhaustion clear in every movement she made. He didn't mind her closeness, though he was wary of being too close with her. It wasn't a wise idea. Eventually, they arrived at the doors to the maiden vault. He released her arm, which he had been holding throughout most of their walk. I can make it to my rooms from here, she said with a heavy yawn. Thank you, for your company. You mentioned wanting to see the children tomorrow. For the midday meal, he replied. I will send a messenger in the morning. Sleep well, my lady. And you, Ned. He expected her to turn and enter the building, instead she embraced him and kissed his cheek quickly. Sleep well. When she was inside the building, he turned and walked toward the Tower of the Hand. He entered the tower, exhausted from the day. Then he walked up the long, winding stairs toward the upper rooms. He came to Caitlyn's door and turned to door handle. Finding the chamber unlocked, he entered. To his surprise, she was still awake. She was seated at the head of the bed, reading a book by candlelight. You're still awake? She looked up at him, a wan smile on her lips. I couldn't sleep. He walked to her, and sat beside her on the bed. I'm sorry. It seemed to be an evening of apologies. I did need to speak with the lords at the feast, we discussed that earlier today. She laid aside her book. I know, it is not the lords whose presence so disturbs my thoughts. He reached for her, holding her small, cold hands with his own. You watched her most of the evening. Ned, I cannot endure this again. He squeezed her hands. I love you, my sweet cat. While I cannot change the past, I can continue to work toward the future which we are building together. I was startled to see Lady Ashura so soon after her arrival, and spent much of the evening thinking upon many matters about which she and I needed to speak. I did speak with her, and it was not a particularly pleasant experience for either of us, given her anger at my not seeing the children since they were very young. She pulled her hands from him. What did she expect? That you would leave Winterfell to visit them. She expected that I would send for them. Her lips pressed tight together at his response. I never did send for them, and I will not lie and say that I am glad of that decision. I regret never having sent for them. I will be introducing the children to one another formally tomorrow, and I will allow Ashura's children to visit this tower whenever they desire. I will no longer allow the children to be kept from me. As you will, my lord. She looked away from him, withdrawn. Cat. What more should I say, Ned? I know that I have no voice in these matters. Stricken, he couldn't speak for some time. Have I ever given you cause to believe that you have no say in our lives? I admit that I have made many poor and thoughtless choices, but I have tried to do what is best for you and our children. However, I also have 4 children apart from you for whom I am responsible, and I must think of them. I know, she said quietly. He held out his arms to her. Please, my love, let me hold you. Slowly, she moved and settled against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, breathing her scent and holding her close. I am sorry, for all the pain I have caused you. I know that you fear what her children might do, but if they grow close to one another, it will be for the better and not the worse. It's not her children I fear, she murmured against his chest. It's you. She looked up at him, pained. You have forsaken our marriage vows for her more than once. How can I not fear that you will again? He raised a hand and gently cupped her cheek. I have given you no reason to trust me regarding her. However, I will not allow myself to be in compromising situations with her. I know that she and I will have to have many conversations with one another, but you will always know when I am meeting with her. And wherever she and I speak will be public. I will hide nothing from you, just as I will tell you that I walked her to the doors of the Maiden Vault tonight while we spoke. I will not dishonor you again. She was quiet for a long time before she yawned, utterly spent. We should sleep. He looked to her, uncertain if she wanted him to stay or go. Stay with me, she said gently. I don't think that I will sleep if you leave. He pressed a soft kiss to her lips. I will always be here when you need me. The first few rays of dawn were sneaking above the horizon as Alysanne Sand walked along the walls of the Red Keep. The gulls would shriek in the sky upon occasion, breaking the quiet of the morning. She still found peace in the early morning hours, when the world was quiet and she could think. She felt adrift on the sea, alone, though she was with her family. Her mother now felt a stranger to her. Her brother John, she could scarce look upon him without thinking of what she knew. She feared that she might tell him, and was angry that he didn't know. Her father, she had spent so many years dreaming of meeting him, of spending time with him. He had been so kind, so wonderful when they had met, exactly as her mother had always said. But how could she see him the same way now that she knew he had killed her uncle? She knew that she should be glad of her family's presence. She knew that she should be glad of John's increase in standing. Yet she felt little joy or security in King's Landing. She wanted to go home, to the places she had known all her life. The world had made sense at Starfall. The world had been simple before her father had come south, when he was a myth written in letters and words spoken by her mother. She studied the horizon, watching the sky grow lighter as the sun broke above the sea. She would have to return to her rooms soon, to break her fast with her family. She wondered when they would meet with their father again. She wondered how long she could keep herself from telling John of his birth. He had known something was wrong when he hugged her in welcome last night. He was the brother in whom she had always confided, but now. With a heavy sigh she looked up and saw a man walking toward her with two large animals beside him. She froze. The direwolves approached her quickly and he ran to catch up with them, shouting their names. She breathed again when they stopped in front of her and began to sniff her thoroughly. "I am so sorry, my lady," he said when he reached the wolves. "They are normally better behaved." "They seem to like me," she said, laughing nervously. "So it seems. Grey Wind, Nymeria, to me, leave her alone." The wolves eventually complied, each licking her hand briefly before sitting near him. He smiled apologetically. "I am truly sorry if they frightened you. Normally they are much better behaved. They have been penned inside the Godswood most of the time since our arrival. I didn't expect anyone to be here." "It's quite all right," she replied. She studied his face and the red shine of his hair, and she laughed to herself. "I am amazed that you seem so fearless with them. They seem friendly enough, for direwolves. And I have heard of them before seeing them." He eyed her curiously. "You are Dornish?" She replied, laughing lightly to herself. "And you are from the north?" She wondered idly how long she could pretend to not know him, but knew that she would tell him momentarily. "Robb Stark," he said, extending his hand in greeting that he might kiss hers. When he released her hand, he continued. "I am the heir of Winterfell." "I know who you are," she giggled. "I am Alysanne, your sister." He laughed with her, shaking his head. "It seems that none of us were meant to be introduced properly." "No, little brother, it would seem not." "Little brother, now that's a new thought." He smiled uncomfortably. "This all seems so strange, meeting you, Jon, and Arthur." It was a feeling with which she had grown accustomed. "I know the feeling. Though having spent the past several months with Sansa and Arya, I must say that I enjoy getting to know my sisters. I feel the same about Jon and Arthur. We've sparred a few times over the past few weeks. I heard that father has taken the three of you into the city. He showed us around, took us to see the jewelers, armorers, and weaponsmiths. He's having them make something for each of us, from you to Rickon, but he wouldn't say what. Perhaps he wishes to surprise us all." He walked toward the parapet, the direwolves pacing behind him. "I know. You're just impatient to learn what the surprise is." He smirked. "You know me already. I know my brothers. You are the same age as Jon, and Arthur's scarcely younger than you, not surprising that you'd be similar." She started laughing and moved to stand beside him. "Though, I do wonder which of you is the best sword. I am thus far, though Jon has not been able to train for long periods of time. He's still healing from his injuries. He has always been the best of us, when training. Though we have each bested him a time or two." "Each?" He stared at her in shock. "You have trained at swords with our brothers." She subtly lifted her skirt to the side, and he saw the thin blade which was strapped to her leg. "In Dorne, many women train with swords. Most of us do so privately, as we wish to be considered ladies, but many of us look to Queen Nymeria as the model of what we wish to be. My mother never learned to wield a blade, but Prince Oberyn trained me beside his daughters." Arya was very happy to learn that her interests were rather common in Dorne. "Were you the one who gave her the little blade she carries?" "I was," he admitted. "She loved to watch Bran and I train, and thought it terribly unfair that she wasn't allowed. I knew that it would be a long time until I saw her again, so I asked our smith to make one for her. She's a quick study. I think you should see her at work, you'll be impressed. I will be certain to ask her when we break our fasts this morning." He must have noticed how dark her expression grew, for he seemed concerned. "Is something the matter?" "No," she forced a smile. "It's only I've spent the past several months with our sisters. Now, it just seems strange to not be together." "Oh. Well, father won't keep us apart." "No," she replied darkly, "but your mother might not appreciate the presence of myself or my brothers." He frowned. "No, you are likely right. I'm sorry." Her lips twisted in a wry smile. "It is no fault of yours. However, as I think of breaking our fasts, I believe that I should return to my room so that I might eat with that part of my family." "Of course. It was nice meeting you." She favored him with a genuine smile. "I am glad to have met you." She turned and took a few steps away before turning back. Rob, do you like riding? He laughed, surprised by the question. I do. We should go riding together soon. I'd like that. I'll hold you to it, she laughed, turning away again. She walked along the walls, then down the tower which led to the courtyard. She walked to the maiden vault and then up the staircases and along the corridors until she reached her family's rooms. Her Aunt Illyria and Uncle Beric were already seated in the common room, each of them writing at the large table in the center of the room. Illyria looked up at her. Did you enjoy your walk? Not as much as I enjoy riding, but it was nice. I met my half-brother Rob. He was taking the direwolves for a walk. Direwolves in the Red Keep, Beric muttered. What madness made the king think that allowing them in the castle was a good idea? They seemed tame, terrifying, but tame. Where else would they have been kept? Beric looked up at her, a hint of humor in his eyes. Beyond that wall of ice in the far north. She laughed. Father allowed my half-siblings to keep them and train them. I've heard that Rob even used his in battle. It still sounds like madness to keep such a beast as a pet, Illyria said. Alysanne walked to the table and seated herself beside her aunt. Perhaps it is, but I wouldn't mind having one. Illyria shook her head. And where would you keep a direwolf? I don't know. Why is no one else awake? I'm hungry. Your mother returned very late and your brothers and cousin are still asleep from having spent most of the night chattering away, which you were part of, her aunt replied. And I was still awake before dawn, as I always am. You'll want to sleep by the mid-afternoon, her uncle said. She stuck out her tongue in protest. I'll be fine. If that is what you believe, Illyria teased. Well, our food should arrive soon. Why don't you get Edric and Lucas up? She wrinkled her nose. Fine. It's better than trying to pry John away from Ty or ever attempting to wake up Arthur. Her aunt and uncle laughed while she stood and walked to the rooms of her brother and cousin. Edric, she knew, was the easiest to wake up, followed by John, then Lucas. As predicted, Edric awoke with little fuss while Lucas required a bit more encouragement, namely being tickled until he was genuinely awake. While she was waking them up, her aunt and uncle worked on waking up the rest of the family. By the time they were all awake and dressed, the servants had arranged trays of food in the dining area of their suite. Upon the trays were blackberry honey cakes, fried fish, soft-boiled duck eggs, and fire peppers stuffed with goat cheese, with chilled ale and steaming hot tea to drink. They sat around the table together, Ashura, Alysanne, John, Tyen, Arthur, Lucas, Edric, Illyria and Beric Dondarrion. Alysanne couldn't help but smile to be surrounded by her family. Her misgivings from earlier in the morning faded as she realized that she was home, even in a strange place, because she was with her family. They talked as they ate. They spoke of their family who were home, running Starfall and Blackhaven. Lord Dondarrion's brother, Sir Rylan, had returned safely from the war and was again assisting Lady Saryn with the management of Blackhaven in Beric and Illyria's absence. Edric's mother, Lady Marissa, was still managing the affairs of Starfall, though her letters spoke of how strangely quiet Starfall had become since everyone's departure. Tyen very briefly spoke of her reunion with her father and eldest sister, but otherwise preferred to avoid the subject of family. I met Rob this morning, Alis eventually informed them. Oh, where did you see him? John asked. I was taking a walk along the battlements, and Rob was taking the wolves for a walk along the battlements at the same time. Lucas sat up straight. You got to see the direwolves? Alis laughed. And they could eat you whole. His nose wrinkled, annoyed. Arya has one of them and she's smaller than me. Beric regarded the youngest Sand sternly. Which means that the beast might eat her and then still have room for you. The wolves were kind, Alis protested. Though they should be respected as should any beast we tame. Would you treat a hawk like a cat? Ashura laughed lightly, shaking her head. Really, Beric, I have faith that Lord Stark would not have allowed his children to have the wolves nor brought them within the Red Keep if they were not tamed. In other matters, she turned to the children. Your father spoke with me last night and said that he intends to meet with you today. While her brothers seemed pleased to know they would be meeting with their father, Alis fretted. She didn't know what to think of him after learning so many painful truths. Thankfully Arthur spoke up, distracting her. Father was at the feast last night. Their mother's eyes narrowed. Yes, and his wife. It was, all things considered, an uncomfortable event. However, the king and Princess Ariane seemed to be working splendidly well together, which is all that matters. More than one person at the table regarded Ashura with skepticism, but they let the matter pass. After they had finished dining, a messenger arrived from Lord Stark formally requesting the children's presence at the midday meal in a few hours. They told the messenger that they would gladly attend, and he left. They spent the rest of the morning on various tasks, until the time arrived for the children to all share the midday meal with their father. Underscore 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 underscore. When it was time for the midday meal, Ned was greeted by the sight of 7 children entering the room to dine with him. Rob, Sansa, and Arya entered first, followed several minutes later by Alysanne, Jon, Arthur, and a younger boy who he rightly assumed was Lucas. "Good day, Father," Alysanne said. "May I introduce you to Lucas, my youngest brother? Lucas, this is our father, Lord Eddard Stark, and our half-brother Rob." Ned walked toward the boy and knelt so that he was at eye level with him. "Hello, Lucas," he said, holding his hand out in greeting. The boy accepted his hand tentatively. After a few moments' consideration he spoke up. "You look like Jon, just old." Ned and his children all laughed. "And you look a bit like your half-brother Brandon. I'm glad to meet you." Ned stood, and walked toward the table which was prepared for the midday meal. "Come, let's eat and speak with one another." They were all agreed, each of them taking seats around the table. The children who had met before spoke easily, prompting the children who had spent less time together to join in. Even where they sat seemed to be influenced by their budding friendships. Arya settled herself between Arthur and Lucas while Sansa sat between Rob and Alysanne, Jon beside Arthur and Ned. It felt almost perfect to see all of his children, except for Bran and Rickon, together, if only all 9 could be together. "You may all come and go from the Tower of the Hand as you wish," he told Ashura's children during the course of their meal. They seemed surprised, but he assured them that their mothers were both aware that they would be allowed to come and go. They were excited by his response, relieved that a barrier between them was removed. When their plates were emptied, they still spoke. Ned noticed that Alysanne was colder toward him than she had been when first they met. Given that she now knew of Jon, he could scarcely blame her for her distance. When he considered Lucas, he didn't know if he should be glad or ashamed that the boy was clearly and most decidedly his own. That he bore a resemblance to Bran, his dear boy who would never climb again, broke his heart. Underscore 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 underscore. Tyenn Sand spent the majority of her second day in King's Landing with her sisters. She preferred Ariane's company, but her cousin had spent nearly the entire day discussing the ins and outs of her impending marriage to the king with the king, Quentyn, Garland Tyrell, and Tyenn's father. Not that Tyenn minded spending time with her sisters, Nymaria's loss had made their presence all the more precious to her. She missed Sarilla, wishing that they could all mourn together. Still, it was sweet to spend time with her family. They dined together that evening, along with Ariane, Quentyn, and Oberyn. That evening, Tyenn went to Jon. Though they had spent the previous night together, much of it had been spent with Jon's brothers, sister, and cousin, until they had all gone to sleep for the evening. While the previous night had been spent mainly sleeping in one another's arms, this second night they spent enjoying the more physical nature of their relationship. When they were ready to sleep for the night, she lay curled upon his chest, her fingers idly tracing the scars he had received in battle. She was shocked by how precious he had become to her. Elia had called it love, and maybe it was, though Tyenn couldn't quite admit that to herself yet. What she could admit was that she had been terrified that she could lose him like she had lost Nym. Jon. Home. She sat up, pushing her hair behind one shoulder. "We should get married." He laughed. "That's why we're betrothed, isn't it?" She rolled her eyes. "I meant sooner rather than waiting. Nym's death, Your injuries, it showed me how short and uncertain our lives can be. I don't want to wait anymore. Nothing is stopping us. He smiled at her and kissed her. Why not tomorrow? She laughed. We can, though we may need to ensure that everyone can be ready so soon. We are still so newly arrived to the city, and you just met with your whole family today. Then the next day, or whenever it best can be done. We have no reason to delay. And after Ariane's wedding and coronation we can visit the lands that the king has granted me. I'd like that. I think it would be nice to get away with just you, for a little while. She gave him a quick kiss before curling under the linen blankets and pressed her back to him so that he would cuddle her. He was quick to respond, wrapping his arms around her and pressing a kiss right behind her ear. I never want you to leave me. I never will, he promised. Their families were surprised, though hardly shocked at the speed with which they chose to wed. None argued against delaying, so the preparations were made right away. 3 days later they stood in the Red Keep's September, surrounded by their family and friends. They were a strange gathering of nobles and bastards, with even the king of Westeros in attendance. Tyen wore white, trimmed with gold lacing and slashed with patterned orange and red silk. Jon also wore white, trimmed with silver and violet. They said their vows in the light of the seven, and at the end kissed for the first time as husband and wife. She may not have been able to say out loud how she felt for him, but none could doubt the love in her eyes as she became his wife. Underscore 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 underscore. They had been in King's Landing for around a little over a week when Alysanne went for a ride outside the city walls with her father, brothers, half-sister Arya, and good sister Tyen. The direwolves came with them, eager for a run beyond the confines of the city. Sansa had chosen to remain inside, as she didn't enjoy riding. She watched her brothers all race one another, and Arya chasing after them. Arya and Lucas were still the worst riders, but they were also the youngest and would improve with time. It felt good to be out of the city, and to be riding. So much had changed in so short a span of time, being on a horse made life feel simpler again. When they were a few miles from the city, her father reined up beside her and they slowed to a trot beside one another. The rest of the family was ahead of them, still galloping across the fields with the wolves. We should speak, he began. She considered him curiously. Have we not been speaking? He sighed. I believe that you know what I mean. I know what your mother told you regarding Jon. She pressed her lips together for several moments before speaking. You know the most difficult part of knowing the secrets my mother told me. She turned to him, angry. She had raised me to see you as a hero. She raised all of us to see you as a myth or legend. Perhaps I'm angry because I cannot understand the man you are. I cannot understand how my uncle could be the one to bring you and my mother together and then you would be the one to slay him. I cannot understand how she would lie with you again after learning the truth. And I cannot understand why I wasn't angry with you for keeping us from you. And Jon, I wonder how long I will be able to stop myself from telling him the truth. He deserves to know. He knows something is wrong with me, they all know. Thankfully Ty takes up most of Jon's free time. And I am not foolish enough to endanger our lives by speaking a word of this within the city, but Jon does deserve to know. Her words ended, she turned from him and looked across the landscape, bringing her horse to a stop. He was quiet for a long time before responding. I know this will not make anything easier, but I never intended for any of this to happen. Learning about your birth was one joy in the midst of all the sorrows of the war. He smiled fleetingly at her, which she reciprocated. Your mother and I have had a very complicated past, and nothing about it is easy to explain, nor does it matter at this point. I agree with you that Jon should know, but consider what you ask. Would it make Jon's life easier for him to know? She watched Jon as he rode beside Tyen, his wife. They were laughing together. Robb slowed, making sure that Lucas and Arya were keeping up. No, she said quietly. But if I could add up the months and realize that Jon's birth was impossible, then so can someone else. She looked up at him, weary and sad. Have you thought of a lie for that? He ran a hand through his beard. No, We never considered that possibility until now. I will have a discussion with your mother about it. They were quiet for several minutes before she spoke again. Would the king truly execute us all if he knew that John wasn't who we say he is? John saved his life. You put him on the throne. The king is going to war against his own brother soon enough. I wouldn't hedge my bets with anyone who wears a crown. Kings forget friends and family soon enough when they are comfortable in their reigns. Then the lie must be a good one, or the kingdoms will war again. If the king ever learns, and he is wed to Arianne and Quentin is wed to Margaery Tyrell, then the war which was just fought against the Lannisters will seem as nothing. Pray that the secret dies with those who know, and that we may all live at peace. She looked at John again, and how he rode with their siblings and his wife. I will keep the secret. No matter that John might in truth be her cousin, he was still her brother in every way that mattered. She could keep the lie to protect him, to keep her brother safe. She looked at Arthur, laughing with Robb and Arya. They are happy. Are you? She looked at her father again and laughed. Most days. Life has been harder since you came south, though I suppose that is true for you as well. But I met you and my sisters, and Robb, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. He smiled at her. I wouldn't trade the time I have spent with the four of you for anything in this world either. I am sorry that I never sent for you. I will regret it for the rest of my life. She bit her lip, her eyes welling with tears. We'll be separated again though, won't we? If you return to Winterfell we won't be able to come. He considered her with care, his expression unreadable. You can come if I allow it. She gasped. But, you never have, and your wife. My wife and I will have much to discuss before I can make any certain plans, and I will have to speak with your mother, but if I wish to invite my children to Winterfell no one will be able to defy that order. She opened and closed her mouth wordlessly, shocked. After a few moments, she regained her voice. Do you truly mean that? He nodded solemnly. I do. I want to spend more time with each of you. Last I saw the three of you, none of you were higher than my knees. Now, John's a married man, you're a grown woman, and Arthur is in a betrothal he would rather not have. And my eldest three sons are now men of war. Why betroth Arthur to little Myrcella? He sighed. To control the Lannisters. If the king has his way, he will choose matches for every Lannister hostage we have just to ensure the loyalty of their house. He holds most of their heirs. The former princess deserves a good life, her parents' sins should not be held above her head. By betrothing her to Arthur, she will be safe, and the crown will hold sway over Tyrion Lannister's nearest kin. Are we all just pieces in a game then? Every one of us to be traded on best intentions to a greater cause. His expression was grim when he looked at her. Yes, though I thought your mother would have taught you that. She laughed, a bit sardonic. There are a good many things which my mother should have taught us, but she didn't. She has always preferred to live in the present rather than planning for the future. Some days I think that she believes we're still little children. I can hardly blame her for seeing you as children, every one of you is growing too fast. Soon you will all be married and have children of your own. Very likely all of your matches will be arranged for political reason as mine own was. Will I? She considered him carefully. Do you have a match picked out for me as well? No, I don't. Choosing Tywin for John was as much Oberyn's doing as it was mine, and choosing Arthur's match was as much political as it was to protect young Myrcella. Sansa's former betrothal to Joffrey Hill was a match of politics. As for the rest of you, matches will be made when the time is right. When the highest bidder makes an offer. Her voice was tinged with grim humor. He gave her a wry smile. Something like that. Unlike your brothers, as our situation is less dire and you are of age, you will be involved in the process of choosing your match. Oh, I'm sure Arthur will be thrilled to learn that. He'll claim that I am being shown favoritism. You could always avoid telling him that you will be allowed a choice. She laughed. Will I always have a choice? What if the war strikes up again, and it's convenient for you to marry me off? His smile was shrewd. Choose swiftly then. The king's wedding is in a few weeks, and you will be a guest. I've already had lords who are showing interest in my wife's children. When they see you, I'm sure that more than a few lords will ask for your hand. You think that lords will want a bastard's hand? Such things have happened before. Your birth may be illegitimate, but your mother and I are both well born. Your bloodline is among the best that can be offered, true-born or not. You are well educated, beautiful, and are brilliantly smart. Not to mention that your dowry will be the same as Sansa and Arya's. She gaped at him again. The same. But they are your sisters, and you are of no less value to me than they. She sobbed quietly, shocked. You are my daughter, my firstborn. I may have held Jon first, but you are the first child of mine that I ever saw, ever held. I knew then that if I could give each of you the world that I would. He reached to her and brushed away her tears. And though I may have failed you before, I want to make a new start with each of you if I can. Laughing through her tears, she shook her head in agreement. I think that anything is possible. He smiled at her. Shall we go catch up to the rest of them? Yes, I think we should. Underscore 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 underscore. 2 days after Ned went riding with the children, he met with Ashura. It was late in the afternoon when they met, upon the same terrace where he had met with Oberyn to discuss Cersei's children. Ned's children, except for Sansa, Oberyn's older girls, and Edric Dane were in the training yard. The noise of the sparring would keep quiet any discussions which he and Ashura might have. His guards would prevent anyone from drawing near them. And they would be easily seen by any prying eyes. The diversion was as good as any he could improvise and stay true to his promises that he would not be seen with Ashura in a compromising place. She arrived some time after he had and was greeted coolly by his guards. Her gown fluttered as she sat across from him. Her dress was white, trimmed with vibrantly colored embroidered flowers. He was amazed, once again, by how lovely she was. You wanted us to meet in a public place where we might speak privately. She looked out at the yard. And yet we meet in plain sight of all your children, and Oberyn's girls. I have had a lot on my mind lately, and I want to avoid any unwarranted gossip. Unwarranted gossip about us. Her voice teased. I hardly think that any meeting between us will cause unwarranted gossip. Clearly we are only meeting with regards to our children, nothing more. It must be hard work managing 7 children and assisting as hand of the king. I must say, the children all seem happier for it, even Alis, who scarcely smiled since Blackhaven seems to have lifted in spirits since you went riding with her. She and I had a long conversation during our ride. Which went well, I assume. It did, and she brought up a very important point which I need to discuss with you. And that would be a strategic lie. He looked out at their children in the yard. Alysanne and Tyen were both showing Arya how to hold a bow. Edric and Lucas were sparring beside Robb and Oberyn. Meanwhile, Elia was showing off her skills with a spear to Jon and Arthur. If Alysanne can add up the months between my eldest 3 sons, then so can someone else. We need a second story if anyone finds the holes in the first. She tilted her head slightly, pondering. Have you devised a tale, Ned? If anyone isn't satisfied that Jon is mine, we will claim that he is my brother Brandon's. Brandon's? He was dead long before. We can say that he is older than we have claimed, say that he is of age with Alysanne. Brandon had a few liaisons, including at Harrenhal, any of which could have left a bastard. If we say that the mother died, and that his caretakers found me when I was in the Stormlands at the end of the war, who would dispute it? Did the servants at Starfall truly account for Jon's age when he arrived? He watched her consider all the possibilities in her mind. No, no one would know the difference. She sighed heavily. It's a reasonable lie and no one would be able to dispute it. I can easily say that I took him in so that his life would be simpler, it's close enough to the truth. She placed her head in her hands, weary. May we never need to tell the lie or the truth. That is my greatest hope. She looked up, smiling lightly. Was this all you wished to discuss, Ned? He knew there was more. He knew what he needed to tell her and to tell Catelyn. He had thought of little else for many days, though he wondered what the consequences would be. I am planning to resign my position here within the next few months. The king is well aware of this and so is Catelyn. Afterward, I will be returning to Winterfell. I want your children to accompany me. She stared at him, her mouth agape. Truly. But, for how long? Will you take all of them? I will take them all if they are all willing, and I doubt that Jon will be able to leave the king's service for longer than a year if he chooses to go. But. She placed a hand upon her chest, looking panicked. You'll take them all from me. His eyes narrowed in confusion. I thought that you wanted me to spend time with them. To take them to Winterfell. I did, but, to take them all. I'll be all alone. Sympathetic, he softened his expression. I am not demanding their departure, only asking that they come north and see their father's home. Do they know yet? Did your wife approve? No, you are the first person I have told. Her countenance darkened. And will she allow your children north? Will she allow them to be welcomed in your home? His expression hard, he could think of only one answer. Catelyn will not be thrilled with my wishes, but she will allow it. Ashura stood, angry and disgusted. Of course she will, Ned. It's not like you are giving her an option. What would you have me do? First she had wanted him to take the children and now she was angry that he wanted them to come to Winterfell. She threw up her hands, which attracted the gaze of the children. I don't know, Ned. I don't know what I want or expect from you. Tell the children that you want them to join you in the north. Ask the king for Jon's leave to join you. I don't care anymore, Ned. It seems that you will do as you will no matter what anyone else desires. With that, she turned and left the courtyard. The children looked to him with questioning expressions. He would tell Ashura's children next, and hoped that their reactions would be better. In the evening, he would tell Catelyn, which he expected to go even worse than his meeting with Ashura. Underscore 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 underscore. In the evening, Catelyn sat in the Han Solo, writing letters after dinner. Ned joined her shortly after she arrived. He had been quietly brooding during their meal, and they had not yet had time to speak on whatever matter was bothering him. His bastards had not appeared in the tower that day, having spent much of it out of doors with Catelyn's own children. She was growing used to their appearing in the tower, and they had been courteous enough to never be seen by her. She watched as Ned settled himself into the large chair behind the Hand's desk. He seemed far wearier than she had seen him in some time. You spoke with Lady Ashura for quite some time today, she began, her voice inquiring. To her, and to the children. I have been thinking for quite some time about the future. We will leave in a few months, after the wedding and coronation. You have said as much before. She considered him with some trepidation. I would like for Lady Ashura's children to accompany us to Winterfell and to remain there for a year. Catelyn felt gutted, though she couldn't say that she was surprised. She breathed deeply, knowing that she had only one reply to give. Her voice was toneless as she spoke. As you will, my lord. Cat. His voice and eyes were pleading with her. She closed her eyes and shook her head. I am your wife, and most days I do love you. I am glad that you honored me by never bringing your bastards to Winterfell. I respect that you want to know them. Ned, that makes you a good man, a good father. But when I see them, when I think of them, all that I see is your betrayal. I was raised to expect my husband to have bastards when he was away at war. She stood, pacing. When you told me of your firstborn, I understood. I was betrothed to Brandon when she was conceived. That you managed to have 2 other bastards with that woman during the war, and still marry me. She was shaking, her emotions raw. I felt a pawn in the matter, but I had known that from the start. You needed my father's allegiance to the war. I thought that you would send for her, keep her as a mistress, but you didn't. I felt safe with Robb and Sansa, 2 healthy heirs. I felt sure that you would stay loyal to me, that whatever had transpired between you and Ashura Dayne was in the past. Then you left when I was nearly to term with Arya to fight a war for Robert Baratheon. You told me nothing of visiting Starfall when you returned home, and soon I was with child again. I loved you then, until I found those letters about a child who had been born whose paternity was questionable. A boy who is only 7 months older than Bran." She turned to face him, cold with fury. "Can you imagine how that felt? Can you imagine how it feels to be betrayed by someone you love? To know that while I nursed our daughter you traveled all the way to Dawn and took your lover to bed? That you hid that secret from me and only told me because I had discovered the truth? That I still lie awake at night wondering how many secrets you have kept from me, how many lies you have told?" His eyes fell from her to the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Only one lie?" "One," she snapped. "Only one." His eyes were distant, as far away as Winterfell. "I cannot speak it, but I can write it," he said eventually. She sighed. "If that is your wish." He picked up a parchment, spreading it out before him, then he picked up a quill and dipped it into the inkwell. He wrote slowly, etching out the words with pain while she paced the room. When he finished, he turned the paper toward her. She sat to read it. "My dearest cat. I do not deserve your love. I never have. If you refuse me from this day forth it will scarcely be undeserved. Lies of omission I have discovered are easier to tell than any other. In seeking to avoid hurting you, I have only hurt you more. No apologies or words will ever amend the wrongs I have committed against you. There is only one lie for me to confess, and after I have done so, it still must remain a secret. When Robert's rebellion was at an end I came to a tower in the Dornish marches where my sister Lyanna was held. Arthur Dayne was one of her guards, and I slew him in combat. I found Lyanna in the tower, dying. As she died she made me swear a promise, which I have failed time and again to fulfill. That promise was to protect her son, Jon. We traveled to Starfall afterwards so that I might return Dawn to its rightful place. It was then and there that I learned I had a daughter, and where Ashura agreed to claim Jon as her own. For his safety, for the sake of Sir Arthur, she agreed to keep him. To my shame, my son Arthur is a result of that stay at Starfall. I should have told you, so many times, that he is my nephew, but I couldn't. I worried for your safety if Robert ever learned the truth. I felt it easier to ignore the unpleasant truths than to ever speak them aloud. I spoke with Ashura today of a lie for the boy, should anyone question the time of his birth. We have agreed to claim that he is older than he is, and that he is the son of my brother Brandon with another woman. The lie is imperfect, but it is also impossible for anyone to disprove. If we should talk on these matters, it must be where no ears may overhear. I do not trust speaking these secrets within the wall of these buildings." When she finished reading, angry tears upon her cheeks, she stood and threw the parchment into the fireplace where it melted into flame and ash. Speechless and hollow, she left the room. She walked to her bedchamber and barred the door behind her. Arya Stark walked to the outer courtyard behind her parents, Robb and Sansa. There they joined the masses of nobles and courtiers who were traveling to the September of Baelor for the wedding of King Renly Baratheon to Princess Arianne Martell. Some were riding to the September while others were traveling in carriages and litters, still others were walking, though they had already departed. Arya wanted to ride, instead she entered the litter with her mother and sister while her father and brother rode. The curtains of the litter were open as they made their way from the Red Keep toward the city. Arya was glad of the breeze, and that her dress was still one of the Dornish gowns she had been given in Dorne. The heat of the day was suffocating, and the thin blue gown was wonderfully relieving. Sansa's gown was also one of her Dornish dresses, yellow and bright like the sun, patterned with green and purple threads. Arya, Sansa, Robb, and their half-siblings all wore silver pendants which their father had given them. He had given them all silver wolves and steel daggers. The daggers bore 2 emblems, a wolf and a trout for his true-born children and a wolf and a star for his bastards. The eyes of the pendants were amethysts for the bastards and sapphires for the true-born children. Arya loved her gifts, and knew that her brothers and sisters loved them all as well. Mother wore her green gown again, with a white corset, a gold belt, and gold necklaces. She was also sad, as she had been for a few weeks. Arya wondered what was wrong between her parents. They seldom ever fought, and even when they had all was usually quickly amended. Now, nothing seemed to make them happy. She wondered if Lady Ashura was to blame, but Aelys and her brothers seemed to think their mother was also not getting along with father. Was it because father had promised Lady Ashura's children that they could come to Winterfell? Sansa chattered happily along the way about the wedding and the feast that was to follow. Arya and other children of the court would only be attending the feast for the few hours, long enough to eat and see some of the entertainment, but miss all of the dancing and whatever else adults did at feasts. Sansa, Robb, Alysanne, Arthur, Edric, and Jon would all attend the entire affair. Lucas would leave when Arya left. Arya was glad that she would have him as a companion for the rest of the evening instead of being alone. She was also happy that Jane Poole wasn't attending the feast at all. When they arrived, they were escorted into the large septry, and positioned near the front of the masses of attendees. The September was beautiful. The colored glass of the windows showered rainbows of light upon everyone in the room. When everyone was settled into their positions, the king and his guards stepped to the front of the room, onto the platform at the front. The High Septon stood with them, prepared to perform the ceremony. A hush fell upon the crowd as Princess Arianne Martell entered the room. The jewels she wore glittered as she moved. Her burnt orange gown caressed the floor as she walked. Her entire bodice was covered in an intricate web of gold and jewels, winding their way to her neck. Upon her back she wore her silk maiden's cloak bearing the pierced son of House Martell. The princess smiled beautifully, awing the crowd. There was no hesitation or fear in her steps, only confident duty. She was given to King Renly by her brother, Prince Quentyn. She and the king smiled at one another as they said their vows, but Arya didn't think they loved one another. Jon and Tyenn had been practically glowing as they wed. Did her parents smile as they married? Would Arya marry someone who could truly make her smile? The ceremony progressed slowly. Jon's had felt faster for some reason. They said the 7 vows, invoked the 7 blessings, and exchanged the 7 promises. Afterward, the wedding song was sung and the challenge given and unanswered. Quentyn then removed his sister's maiden's cloak. Renly accepted the new cloak from Jon, who stood beside him. He tenderly placed the cloak bearing the crowned stag of House Baratheon upon her shoulders, clasping it. They pledged their love and kissed to cheers. The ceremony done, they departed from the September, followed by the crowds. Every guest formed a long queue to leave the September, kissing the hand of the king and his new wife as they parted. Arya was glad when they made it back into their litter. The crowds had been suffocating within the September. She had taken to playing with the silver pendant in her boredom throughout the ceremony. Underscore 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 underscore. Lady Catelyn Stark sipped her wine as the first dance of the evening was performed. All of the women of From Dorne stepped into the center of the room, forming a circle around Arianne Martell. Sansa joined them, having learned the dance over the course of the preceding weeks. Catelyn could scarcely refuse her daughter's request to learn a dance to celebrate the wedding of the king to his queen, and so she had willingly allowed her daughter to learn the Dornish dances. The women formed 2 circles, winding between one another. As they twirled on the floor, the Dornish men approached the circle. Each of them were called, one by one, into the dance. The king stood outside the circle, each of the dancers refusing him entry, laughing. It was a game, Catelyn realized. The dancers were keeping the newlyweds apart. At times, the women would allow one of the men into the circle to dance with Arianne, but after a few turns, she would push each of them back to the women who would in turn push the man out of the dancing circles. Slowly, more men joined the dance. Catelyn laughed as she watched the dance, and so did most of the other onlookers. She turned to her brother who was seated beside her. "You should join the dancers. I have no idea how to do this dance. I don't think that most of the men outside of Dorne do either, still they have joined. I think that it's a game. The king's goal is to reach the center, and the other dancers are trying to keep him out of the circle." She gave him a wry smile. "Besides which, you should spend the evening seeing if any of the women here catches your eye. Our father's health is failing and you will soon enough be Lord of Riverrun, and in need of a wife. There are 1,000 guests here and well over 100 eligible women." He rolled his eyes. "I don't need lecture on my duties. Don't you? At your age I was already wed, and a mother." He brooded over his goblet, sipping it slowly. Fine, I'll go search for a bride if that will make you happy. She laid a gentle hand upon his forearm. What will make me happy is for you to find happiness in another. He lowered his voice, glaring at Ned, who was seated to the other side of her. As you have. She returned his glare. Leave it alone. He drained his goblet, and stood. As you wish, Cat. He walked from the table and joined the dancers. She clasped her hands together beneath the table. She needed to speak with Ned, but every time she looked at him, cold fury bubbled up within her. How could he have lied to her for so many years? Lied to her, and yet she could see Ashura amidst the dancers, and hated how angry that woman's presence made her. Ned had trusted this woman with his bastard nephew and lied to her for well over a decade. She forced herself to watch Sansa. Her daughter was happy, laughing and twirling with the other dancers. She noticed that Alysanne Sand was near Sansa. Catelyn had yet to pay much attention to any of Ned's bastards. Both she and they had chosen to avoid one another as much as possible. Young Alysanne looked a bit like Ned, though she favored her mother. She wore the wolf pendant which Ned had given her, as all of Ned's children had that day. Whatever else Catelyn might think of Ned, she knew that he loved his children, and they all seemed to love him as well. Renly Baratheon had finally been allowed into the circle of dancers when Prince Oberyn Martell appeared in front of their table. He stood to the side so that he didn't obscure their view of the dancers. Are you enjoying the dance, Lord and Lady Stark? It's entertaining, said Ned. Catelyn laughed. It's quite clever, though I do admit that I don't fully understand the dance. Oberyn grinned. It's a game, an ancient one from the Rohirrim. Arianne is in the place of the mother goddess, the women are her water spirits. They bring men to her, seeking to find one worthy to be her consort that they might bring forth the spring floods and new life. She rejects them until her true love arrives and she keeps him. But he must learn how to navigate his way to her, or the water spirits will prevent his entry. Catelyn raised a brow. An ancient Rohinish marriage game, about the faith of the Rhoynar, played by those wed under the light of the Seven. He laughed. I promise not to tell the High Septon. Catelyn and Ned both smiled at his comments and they continued to watch the dance. A few moments later, Arianne seemed startled by her companion in the dance, and she spun with him for longer than she had with the other dancers. Oberyn tensed watching them, and Catelyn wondered why. The man was young, handsome, with sandy brown hair, and dimples on his cheeks. The Dornish prince still seemed tense when the young man left the queen's arms and moved back through the circles of dancers. Catelyn looked at Oberyn, curious. Does that young man trouble you, Prince Oberyn? Oberyn's smile was harsh. He is one of my squires, Sir Daemon Sand of God's grace, and I feel that he needs reminded of his position. If you will excuse me. He bowed to them swiftly before he stalked into the crowds. At last, the king found his way to his queen, and they spun in the circle. The women broke apart, each of them reaching for a partner amongst the men who had been rejected from the circle. The music slowly came to a crescendo and then reached its conclusion. The dancers all bowed to one another and then arranged themselves for the next dance as the music began again. Ned looked to her. Cat. She considered him neutrally, the wine and merriment of the evening making her charitable. Yes, Ned. Would you like to dance? He held a hand to her, a gesture of peace. His seemingly neutral expression belied the pleading of his eyes. She pressed her lips together, still angry with him, but she also missed him. She also knew that it would look better in the eyes of the guests if they danced together. She placed her hand in his. I will gladly dance with you, my lord. The dancers arranged themselves in rows, men on one side and women on the other. As the dance progressed, the men would move down the line, and upon reaching the end of the line, walk to the start. The dance would end when everyone was back to their original partner, at least in theory, as pairs at times were known to leave the lines during the dance. Catelyn began the dance with Ned. His soft smiles as they danced encouraged her to smile. They switched partners after a few moments, not speaking a word to one another. The swirl of partners was at times dizzying, she felt as though she danced with all the Seven Kingdoms as the line passed. Eventually she found herself partnered with Petyr Baelish, her childhood friend, and the man who had spread unseemly rumors about her throughout the Red Keep some years past. Cat, he greeted. You look lovely as ever. She favored him with a warm smile. Thank you, Petter. I've heard rumors that you will be returning to Winterfell soon. Soon enough, she replied. I have been away from my youngest children for far too long. Have you solved the mystery of the assassin who was sent after your son? No, it seems that we may never know who performed such a fell deed. She misliked his expression as he offered her his sympathy. Something about his smirking lips caused her skin to crawl. A moment later, the music changed and he moved to the next partner. Underscore 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 underscore. Further down the line of dancers, Ashara Dane began the dance with Ned Stark. She felt as though 100 pairs of eyes bore down upon her as his hands met hers. She smiled at him. Her initial anger at his desire to take her children to Winterfell had subsided. She knew that she should be glad that he wanted to spend time with the children, but she would miss their company. She had never been parted from all of her children for any length of time. They look at us, she stated simply. You would think they would tire of gaping at us. She laughed as he spun her. Oh, why ever would they do that? She paused, smiling at him. Do you remember the first time we danced? He gave her a small smile. At Harrenhal, to a similar dance. She laughed again. Fewer whispered then. They had less reason to. They spun once more before the partners switched. Underscore 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 underscore. Alysanne Sand laughed throughout most of the dances. She flirted with some of her partners, and with others she simply smiled. She couldn't recall ever having so much fun before in her life. The wedding had been beautiful. The feast had been extravagant, and the dances were delightful. She released the hands of a Knight of the Reach and joined her hands to a man with red hair and strikingly blue eyes. She giggled in surprise, realizing that it was Edmure Tully who held her hands. My lady, you are lovely, he said in greeting. I am Edmure Tully. Alysanne, she replied. I thank you for the compliment. My words were not in vain, I assure you. I have never seen violet eyes before, they are quite remarkable. She wanted to roll her pretty eyes with how many comments she had received upon that one tray. Why that you, Lord Edmure? I share the tray with my mother, the Lady Ashara Dane. His countenance changed remarkably at her words. His pretty smile evaporated and he became a paragon of stoic virtue. A pleasure to meet you, Mistress Alysanne, he said in neutral tones. And you, Lord Edmure, she replied, bending to him politely as he moved from her. She danced with 3 more partners before she was paired with a tall, dark-haired young man, whose face seemed to permanently smirk. I believe I have seen you before, he said in greeting. Have you? I must say that it is entirely possible, I have been here for weeks. I'm Theon Greyjoy. Aelys. She favored him with a smile as he spun her. Would you care to have a drink with me, Aelys? It couldn't hurt to have a drink with the heir to the Iron Islands. And she was truly in need of something to drink. Why not? His smile broadened, and walked with her from the line before she could be passed to a new partner. He took her gently by the arm and led her away from the dancers to the lines of servers who passed them goblets of wine. Though it wasn't ladylike, she drained the glass in a few swallows and had one of the servants refill her goblet from the carafe he held. Then they walked to the perimeter of the room, away from the crowds. You are a talented dancer, he told her kindly. I've been learning to dance since I could walk, especially the wedding dance. In Dawn, even the children join in the celebration. I must admit, I've never seen a dance like that before. She laughed. Perhaps it will gain popularity in the rest of Westeros now that it has been danced at the wedding of the king. He grinned at her. Maybe it will. I have heard so many tales of Dawn, but none from a Dornish woman. What is it like? Dawn. She giggled, thinking his question strange. It's my home, She closed her eyes and sighed. Some places in the south, along the coast, You can watch the sun rise and set over the seas. The days are hot, though not like here. The air is thick here and it sticks to your skin, there the air is dry. At night the air is cold, enough to chill you. If you ever visit Dawn, you should visit the water gardens, they are beautiful. He drew closer to her, moving his hand from her arm to the small of her back. As beautiful as you. She rolled her eyes before tightening her head so that she might look at him. More so, I think. Surely that cannot be. Beauties such as you are rare. She smiled sweetly at him, though his flatteries were far from the first she had heard that day. Thank you. He continued to walk with her, flattering her and flirting with her. She willingly flirted back, though she found him to be rather tiresome. He was leading her to a more secluded corner of the room when a voice stopped them in their tracks. Leave her alone, Greyjoy, a voice growled behind them. Alis and Theon turned to see Robb standing there, his face set like stone. What's it to you, Stark? You know how Dornish girls are. She pulled away from him, furious. How Dornish girls are? What's that supposed to mean? Who cares what he meant? Robb spat. He turned from Alis to Theon. She isn't yours to touch. His smirk was condescending. Why, is she yours? Robb's voice was utterly cold as he replied. She's my sister. Theon stepped back and looked between them, confused. Sister. Alysanne Sand, she said. Lord Stark's bastard daughter. He blanched, finally seeing that she and Robb wore matching pendants. He bobbed his head to her while he mumbled his pardons and darted away. Alis looked to Robb, a brow raised. You didn't have to come to my defense. He smiled lightly at her. You're my sister, I have a duty to protect you, especially from Theon. She considered her half-brother and the retreating form of Theon Greyjoy for a few moments. He was raised at Winterfell with you, correct? Yes, which is why I know to keep him away from you. He wouldn't have gotten anything from me. I merely wanted a break from dancing and he provided a distraction. He would have tried to get more from you. More than what? Playful banter and friendly smiles are all he would have gotten. I'm sorry. What? Do you assume that all Dornish girls are promiscuous? Dorne may have a higher view of bastards, and fewer qualms about taking lovers, but we are hardly all lewd. Most noble women are just as virtuous in Dorne as they are in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. She shook her head, annoyed. I've never even kissed. Abashed, he hung his head. I am sorry, truly. It's easy to presume many things about a people without knowing the truth. She raised a brow, still agitated. What did you presume about me? Nothing about you, just about Dorne. Stories of your region's temperaments towards many things may have been exaggerated by the time they reached my ears or Theon's. She considered him circumspectly. I suppose that you are forgiven then. You don't sound entirely convinced of my explanation. I'm not, but I don't believe that you meant any harm. You did gallantly rescue me from Theon Greyjoy. He grinned. I'll be here whenever you need me. Yes, though it would appear that my full brothers are not as attentive as you. She looked out across the vast, cavernous hall of the throne room and found that she couldn't see either of her brothers in the crowds. She did manage to see Sansa, dancing with Sir Garland Tyrell. Though I don't blame them. There are so many people here, so many things to do and see. Are you enjoying the night? I am, though Father reminded me continually of how important this day is for our prestige. You too. Both Father and my mother kept reminding me that this is a good time for me to present myself before the lords of the land so that they might make offers for my hand. Sansa was told the same. Was Arya? Robb burst out laughing. No, she would have behaved abominably if she was told. Alis laughed with him. Oh, can you even imagine? She'd attempt to ruin any chance she has at a match. Well, she is only 10. At worst she would be seen as a troublesome girl. Very true. He sighed, looking out across the crowds with her. Life is so strange. Indeed, a year ago our father was on his way here to serve as Hand of the King to Robert Baratheon, and we had never met. Now, we're guests at the wedding of our new king and queen, our country has seen a small war, and Jon is married. Though the circumstances were grim, I am glad that it led to our meeting. It's nice to finally know my half-sister and half-brothers. I know that Sansa and Arya feel the same. I feel the same as well. I'm happy that father invited us to Winterfell. It will be nice to see your home. Perhaps one day you will come to Starfall. It's beautiful. I would like that, he replied, seeming pleased with the idea. They found an abandoned bench and sat together, watching the dancers. When the partner-switching dance came to an end, a slower dance began. The men and women formed pairs throughout the room, pressing their palms together as they moved their feet to the dance. Alysanne noticed quite a curious sight as her eyes scanned the crowds. Two very tall individuals were dancing with one another. She recognized the woman as Lady Brienne of Tarth, one of the king's personal guard, and the woman who had saved Jon's life in the war. Brienne had trained with the female fighters from Dorne and the North more than once. She knew the man was Northern, but she didn't know who he was. Do you know the man who is dancing with Lady Brienne? She motioned to the pair when Robb seemed confused. Small Janumber, he's the heir of Last Hearth. They watched the pair with fascination. Both Brienne and Jon were smiling as they danced, genuine interest showing in both of their expressions. I think they like one another. The heir of Last Hearth whispered in the ear of the heiress of Tarth, causing a blush to spread from her cheeks to her ears even as she smiled at him. I am inclined to agree with you. She grinned at Robb. It would seem that northern and southern relations are improving markedly of late. He burst out laughing. When he quieted, his reply was more serious. I've heard that there have been some fights between some men from the Reach and from Dorne. She shrugged dismissively. We've been fighting one another for over 1,000 years. Starfall and Old Town have sacked one another hundreds of times, though not since Dorne joined the Seven Kingdoms. You may as well ask for peace between the Blackwoods and Brackens as ask for peace between the border lords of the Reach, Stormlands, and Dorne. How does that bode for the impending marriage of Lady Margaery Tyrell to Prince Quentyn Martell? She will be welcomed as our lady, though I am certain that some will make her transition difficult. When she births young princes and princesses, she will be loved well enough. I suppose that you are right. They watched the various pairs again, spotting friends and family amongst the dancers. Does it bother you that I stopped Theon from talking to you? She laughed. No, I was growing tired of him. Oberyn tells me that I am much like my mother, smiling and flirting with men but never giving them anything. She gasped, putting a hand to her mouth as he looked at her with surprise. I'm so sorry, I forgot. Forgot who I am. She cringed as she let out a short, awkward laugh. Yes, actually. I just feel comfortable with you and Sansa and Arya. I'm not offended and I am glad that you feel comfortable with us. I feel the same. He grinned at her, which she returned. I just hope that everything becomes less awkward with time. I hope so as well. A few moments later he stood and held out his hand to her. Would you like to dance? She put her hand in his. I would love to. Aelys and Robb joined the many pairs of dancers in the center of the room. As they moved, Alysanne spied everyone she knew, except for her brother Arthur. She searched the room for him, but realized that her brother was nowhere to be seen. Underscore 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 underscore. Arthur Sand escaped from the feast shortly after the wedding dance was finished. He felt trapped with so many people in that room. In the warm evening air, he felt more at ease. He was halfway across the outer courtyard when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. He stopped and turned to see Bella walking toward him from the castle kitchens. What were you doing over here? She smiled as she reached him and they resumed their walk to the maiden vault. Celebrating the wedding of the king with all the other servants. When the courses of the meal finished amongst the nobles, the servants of the castle were allowed to eat. The food was wonderful, duck, lamb, tuna, Dornish food which burned the tongue. He laughed. I'm glad that you were able to share in the feast. It was nice, though I am glad to return to my nook for the evening. Your nook, he frowned. Why don't you stay with me again? You haven't slept beside me often since my mother arrived. Your mother can remove me from the household, and she worries over the image put forth by her family. My mother has 4 bastards. The family already has a certain image. She pursed her lips, troubled. You dislike your mother for having bastards? No. He nearly shouted the word, so swift was his reply. I only wish to be treated with equity. My brother took Tien as a lover and no one said a word. I brought you into the household to protect you and suddenly I am being told what I can and cannot do. She cocked her head as she looked at him. Her voice was playful as she spoke. What would you like to do? He felt his neck flush, burning red. I don't rightly know, but I do know that I want to be treated the same as my brothers and sister. Mistress Alisan seems to be quite the virtuous young woman, so I dare say you are treated as she is. He rolled his eyes. Of course Alice is virtuous, she wants to fall in love and marry for love. She's nearly 10 and 7 and she still hasn't kissed anyone. Do you scorn her choice? Or doubt that true love is real? He shook his head. No, but our mother wanted to marry for love, and look where she is, 4 bastards. And Chief Lady in Waiting to the Queen of West Eospella rebutted. Can't complain much there. She should have had more. John was lucky, he got to marry the girl he loves, but I will be forced to marry an incest-bred bastard whom I haven't even met. You should be glad that your father has seen fit to choose a spouse for you. Some bastards have nothing, or they're like me and are born to a whore. What if I would rather have you? He blurted out the question before he could think. She looked at him, at once both happy and melancholy. They stopped, and she ran gentle fingers through his hair. You can't marry me. He rested his hands upon her shoulders, tenderly caressing her. I know, but I also cannot wed the Lannister bastard for years either, she's only 9. Until then, and maybe after, why can't I love you? His heart dropped, suddenly unsure. Unless you don't feel anything for me. She considered him, mixed emotions playing on her face. She took far longer to reply than he found comfortable. I care for you, Arthur, but I've never been cared for by a man before. I've had dozens of men touch me but none of them in love or kindness. I don't know what I want or feel. My body has never been my own to give, nor my heart. I hadn't thought about that. She smiled sweetly. I didn't think you would. You have a good heart, Arthur, and I know that you care for me. But I must also consider my position and safety. Should your affections wane, I will have nothing, less than I had at the start, and worse should my care for you deepen. What if I give you my winnings from the tournament of the hand? I've scarcely spent any of it. It could be yours. I can even have it written as a contract, witnessed by my mother and uncle and whomever else you'd wish. That way you would have safety, money which is yours and yours alone to go with you if ever you leave. I will never send you away, but should you wish to leave at any time you would be free to go anywhere you desired. She stared at him for a long time, both startled and contemplating. There would be no expectation or obligation attached to this gift. None. You helped save my brother's life and you've helped me through everything I saw in that battle. I want you to feel safe, to be safe. Bereft of words, tears began to flow down her cheeks. She laid her head upon his chest and he wrapped his arms around her. When she pulled away again, she smoothed her hair and wiped away her tears. I can never repay you for the kindness you show me. You don't owe me or anyone else anything just because we are nice to you. All you owe anyone when they are kind is a thank you. She laughed, overwhelmed. Thank you then, Arthur, for everything. She reached for his hand and held it. But you've told me that you care for me and that you want me. I must admit, I would like to know what it is like to be shown affection by a man who truly cares. His cheeks burning again, Arthur swallowed the lump in his throat. He felt frozen, wanting to touch her, to kiss her, but unable to do anything now that she agreed. However, she was more adept at handling the situation. She drew near to him and pressed her lips against his own. He had kissed before, 2 different serving girls in Dawn, but while he had enjoyed kissing them, kissing Bella made him feel alive. Finally, he unfroze, his arms wrapping around her as their kiss deepened. When finally they separated, panting for air, he smiled. She too smiled at him, causing lovely dimples to show on her cheeks. He took her by the hand and they walked toward the maiden vault, excited and nervous about everything regarding Bella. As they walked, he noticed a tall, slender girl bolt for the same building. Eliasand, he realized, though he did not know what made her run away so swiftly. As they reached the doors of the building, Arthur could still hear the sound of music, echoing across the castle courtyards. Underscore 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 underscore. Desiring to escape the crowds and heat of the wedding feast, Catelyn Stark made her way to the balconies which were adjacent to the upper galleries of the throne room. Each of the balconies had collected guests who desired to remain at the feast but escape from it as well. She passed by several crowded balconies before she found one containing a solitary woman seated upon a stone bench, facing toward the city. Her black hair was pinned up with sapphires and amethysts. "May I join?" Catelyn's words died on her lips as the woman turned to her, looking up with violet eyes. "You may share the evening air if you wish," Lady Stark Ashara Dayne said. "Though I dare say you would rather not speak with me." "Indeed," Catelyn replied. "Or we could talk." "What would we have to talk about?" A brow raised, Ashara considered Catelyn shrewdly. "Lord Stark plans for my children to accompany you to Winterfell. I find that a matter to discuss, don't you?" Catelyn rested her back against the archway. "What would you like to discuss about my husband's intentions to bring your children north? You don't want them there?" Ashara stood and walked to the balcony's balustrade, resting her hip against it. "Of course I don't want them there. I rather prefer to not see visible proof of my husband's infidelities." Ashara laughed darkly. "Does it really bother you so much that he came back to my bed a decade ago? Many women would call that a bargain. He brought home no northern bastards for you and from all reports took no other lovers. Meanwhile, I am unmarriageable because he left me with 4 little ones and he sits in Winterfell with you and your 5 children, ignoring his children in Dorne until he finally grew a conscience about them. I know women who would call you lucky, our former queen included." "Lucky?" Catelyn regarded her with contempt. "To know that my husband lied to me and betrayed me over and again regarding you. To know that he entrusted you with secrets he only now sees fit to tell me." Ashara blanched, seeming to realize what she meant. She stumbled over her response. He only just told you about." Catelyn took a few steps forward, her voice low. "Secrets regarding some of your children, yes." Incredulous, Ashara began laughing. "I thought he would have told you ages ago." "But, no, of course he wouldn't. Why tell the truth when he can avoid the matter altogether? No wonder everyone has whispered of a rift between you and Ned." Catelyn stiffened at Ashara referring to her husband as Ned. "The rifts between my husband and I are no concern of yours, though they have certainly been caused by you." "By me?" She took a step back, amused and aggravated. "Need I remind you that he wanted to marry me? That when he and I promised one another that we would wed you were betrothed to Brandon Stark? That I did not compel him to come to Dorne during the Greyjoy Rebellion? That I never once had to coax him into my bed, but he came willingly?" She shook her head, a rueful smile on her lips. "Yet he never asked me to join him in Winterfell. He never took me for a mistress and he never asked for the children to come see him until now. Selfish, blind fool that you are. He chose you. He chose to never allow his affection for me to supplant you and your place. He chose to never allow his children with me to visit him. And still you begrudge my children a place in his life." Catelyn stared at her, her fists clenched. The gall of this woman to speak this way to her, and yet, everything that Ashara Dayne had said was true. Ned had chosen her. He had chosen to keep Ashara and her children far from Winterfell and he had never taken another lover. It did not ease the pains she felt by Ned's lies or betrayals, but she knew that if she weren't careful she could easily push Ned back into Ashara's arms. Her hands relaxed, and she clasped them in front of her. "I will not begrudge your children any time with their father. They are welcome at Winterfell as guests for however long Lord Stark wishes them to be there. May it allow our children continue to grow their love and affection toward one another. If you will excuse me." Startled, Ashara inclined her head. "As you will." Catelyn walked from the balcony and looked out across the throne room where the revelers danced and the minstrels sang. She needed to find Ned. Eventually she spied him in the crowds, speaking with Sangza. She walked swiftly from the gallery to the main floor and then to her husband and eldest daughter. Sangza smiled as soon as she saw Caitlin. "Mother, the feast has been wonderful." Caitlin gently cradled her daughter's chin with one hand, somewhat concerned by how flushed her cheeks were. The heat of the room, and the hours of dancing were likely to leave the girl exhausted on the morrow. "I'm glad that you are enjoying the evening. However, I do think that it may be time for you to retire to your room. Find Rob and have him escort you back to the Tower of the Hand." She pouted. "Oh mother, must I?" "Yes," Ned replied. "You must do as your mother says." She still frowned, but she didn't protest. "I shall retire then." She curtsied politely to them both. "Mother, father." Sangza searched the room for Rob, who she spied across the room, speaking with Lady Margaery Tyrell and several other young women. She walked straight to him. Caitlin and Ned watched, amused, as their daughter's appearance before their son caused his grin to drop. Caitlin covered her mouth to stifle her laughter as she watched her children. Beside her, Ned did much the same. Rob was clearly struggling to not seem annoyed by his younger sister. Eventually, Sangza motioned toward Caitlin and Ned, who both dropped their hands so that their children wouldn't see their amusement. Rob looked to them, pleading with his eyes, but was met with a shake of the head from both of his parents. Defeated, Rob excused himself from his admirers and took Sangza by the arm, leading her from the room. Caitlin turned to Ned, suppressing her laughter. "Our poor children, you would think we ruined the entire day for them." Ned grinned at her. "They will forgive us, even if Rob loses some admirers." He looked to her, his smile evaporating as he searched her face. "Can all be forgiven between us?" Breathing deeply, she knew that she had to move past the lies and hurt. "I want us to talk, Ned, about everything. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you or not, but I want us to move forward together. We can't afford to face whatever trials the future will bring if we don't face them together." He took hold of her hand and pressed it to his lips. "As soon as we can speak openly, I will tell you everything." His lip crooked into a gentle smile. "For as long as I draw breath I will work for your forgiveness." "You don't beg them." More than one voice shouted out, cutting off any words which Caitlin would have said. There were soon a chorus of voices shouting for the bedding of the king and his new bride. A crowd formed around Renly Baratheon and Arianne Martell, men and women pulling at their clothes and carrying them from the room. Ned and Caitlin watched, each of them smiling as the young leaders of Westeros were taken to their marriage bed. "They seem happy," she said. "They do. I hope that they can remain happy, for the sake of the future." She looked to Ned, remembering her own, very dutiful, bedding. But duty had become more, it had grown into love. "You don't have to work for my forgiveness, Ned." She placed a hand on his cheek, her fingers threading through the coarse hairs of his beard. "But it will be a very long time before I can trust you again." He placed a hand upon the one on his cheek, and pulled her hand gently away, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You are more than I deserve." She favored him with a small smile. "I shall remember to remind you of that sentiment when it seems that you have forgotten. I'm certain that you will. Shall we retire for the evening?" "I like that idea." He took her by the arm and walked with her from the room, joining the crowds who were also wandering from the room. From the corner of her eye, Caitlin saw Lady Ashura standing in the gallery, watching. She had no words for what she felt about Ashura. She had no regard for the woman, but if it were not for the angry words which they had exchanged, Caitlin would still be avoiding Ned. Underscore 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 underscore. The door to the royal bedchamber was shut behind the very naked king of Westeros and his equally naked bride. Alysanne Sand trailed away from the door with other revelers, as they all made their way back to their rooms for the evening. She had loved every moment of the day, from the wedding to the feast to the dances to the bedding. Someday, she hoped that she would have a wedding of her own to enjoy. Watching her brother's wedding, and now Arianne's, and very soon Prince Quentyn's, she couldn't help but contemplate her own eventual wedding. She knew that it wouldn't be as grand as the king and queen's, but it would be sweet to celebrate with her family, her whole family. Along the way to her room, she found Sir Demon Sand. They walked together through the halls, toward the section of the castle where they were housed. He offered her wine from the goblet he still held, but she refused. "If I drink any more wine, I think I shall be sick." He laughed. "Fair enough." He watched her swaying as they walked. "Drunk. Sober enough to have my wits about me, but yes, I'm drunk." He finished the goblet and tossed it casually onto the flagstone floor. "I'm not nearly drunk enough." He glanced back, in the direction of the chamber which held Ariane and Renly. "She's not yours, Demon." "I know," he spat. "You aren't the only one to remind me of that." "Hey," she laid a hand on his forearm, gentle and comforting. "I'm not here to scold you. I know what happened between the two of you. I can't imagine." He pulled away, unhappy, his voice was firm but not unkind. "I don't need your sympathy either." She turned, glaring at him. "Fine, you don't want my sympathy, then how about this? We're bastards. You and I have nothing but the kindness of our parents to depend upon, we don't even have their names. Ariane was the heir to Dawn, and she drew you to herself because she is beautiful and charming, but she is the sun and the sun burns. You don't think I know that?" His scornful laugh echoed in the corridor. She was grateful that they were alone. "Doran and Oberyn and my father have all said the same to me time and again. But she still encouraged me at times." "Hush," she hissed. "Do you want them to take your head?" He shook his head, still laughing bitterly. "No, I want a woman in my arms to help me forget and perhaps talk me out of my choices." She eyed him warily. "What choices?" He gave her a wan smile. "The king is holding a contest in 2 days, after the coronation, to decide who will fill out his Kingsguard." "I know. I will be competing." She gasped. "You can't." "Why not?" "Because once upon a time I loved her more than anything in this world. I am one of the best swords in Dawn, and I can protect her. You and I were brought up with story upon story of what happened to Elia Martell. Look me in the eyes and tell me that she won't be safer with me in the Kingsguard." She looked at him, shaking her head, but she knew that Ariane would be safer with Demon in the Kingsguard. He wouldn't allow any harm to befall her so long as he lived. "But if he and Ariane ever forgot their vows? I know that you would die for her." "Does anyone else know that you plan to participate?" "No, I haven't said a word to anyone until now." "Will you keep my words a secret?" She knew that she shouldn't. She should tell Oberyn in the morning, or her mother. But she also knew that he would keep Ariane safe. "I won't tell anyone." "But Demon, if you value her life and yours, you will never touch her again." "Do you take me for a fool?" "At the moment, yes, I do. A gallant fool to be sure, but a fool nonetheless." He smiled at her and stopped walking, leaning against the wall. "I said that I wanted a woman to talk me out of my choices, and here you have talked me into them. Now, if only you would be the woman in my arms for the night." She rolled her eyes. "No. My virtue happens to matter to me. Plus, my father plans to sell me off to the highest bidder, and you know that the buyers almost never want second-hand goods." She smirked at him, mocking the words she had spoken. He started laughing as she spoke. "Most of the buyers wouldn't know the difference. I'm not drunk enough to agree to share a bed with you." He stepped toward her, a hand reaching toward her even as he placed another upon his chest in mock pain. "Would you truly need to be drunk to agree?" "More than drunk," she deadpanned, though she allowed him to take her hand. "What about for a kiss?" She chewed on her lip contemplatively. Maybe it was the wine, but she was curious enough to kiss him. He was sweet, and a friend, and this was far from the first time he had asked. She glanced around the corridor. "Not here." He beamed at her. "So is that a yes?" She giggled. "Undecided, but I most certainly won't kiss you here." "Ah, your virtue and the need to sell you to the highest bidder. Well then, shall we walk?" He took her by the arm, whispering a great number of sordid things in her ear to make her blush. At last they reached the halls near her rooms. They stopped near the door to her family's chambers, and he pulled her close to himself. "Shall we go in? And have my brothers kill you?" Like your brothers are even going to see, or your uncle, or your aunt, or your cousin. Edric left long before the bedding started. Lucas has likely been in bed for hours. John and Tyann disappeared during the dances and are likely in their room. Arthur also disappeared during the dances, likely to spend time with the former whore who is a servant in your household. Illyria and Beric left together as the bedding started and are also likely in their room. Which leaves your mother, who may or may not be with Oberyn this evening, one can never tell. She opened and closed her mouth, stunned. How did you notice that much about where my family went? I notice many things, including the fact that if we enter your rooms, no one will see us. She looked up and down the corridor and saw that they were alone. The idea of kissing him still warmed her body, so she opened the door and walked inside with him, closing it behind them. There were only a few candles lit in the common room, indicating that likely no one was awake, though she could be discovered at any time should one of her family decide to pass through the common room of the suite she shared with her mother and little brother. Still, the thrill of her questionable choices only added to the excitement which welled within her. She walked to the cushioned couch which rested against the wall and sat. Demon followed closely behind her, sitting next to her. He pulled her into his arms and gently caressed her neck with one hand, then he bent his face to her neck and traced the same path with his nose and lips, drawing a gasp from her. She felt him smile as he pressed a kiss to her neck, causing more erratic breaths to escape her lips. She knew, somewhere in her mind, that she should stop him and tell him to leave, but she was too fascinated by the experience to stop him. She wanted to feel his kiss upon her neck, and she wanted to kiss him. She could see little in the dim light beyond his smile when he looked up at her. May I? She could manage little but a nod of her head while she looked at him, breathing heavily with her cheeks flushed. He bent to her and pressed his lips against hers. The sensation was strange, lips against lips, and tongues against tongues, but oh, it was exquisite. She kissed him, hungry for something she didn't understand. She wrapped her arms around his neck, running her fingers through his hair. His hands roamed her back, her neck, her sides, and found their way to her breasts where he touched her so tenderly that she moaned against his lips. Encouraged, he continued the gentle caresses, driving her mad with his touch. She pulled away from his lips, burying her face against his neck, and digging her nails into his shoulders. A moment later she found his lips again, dancing with their mouths. One of his hands trailed to her hips, and he shifted so that he laid her upon her back. Stop, she gasped, willing herself to say what she didn't want. She pressed her hands to his chest. You have to go. He stilled, but didn't move away. Please, we have to stop. He pulled away slowly, his chest heaving. You don't really want me to leave? He wasn't asking a question, rather stating what he knew. She closed her eyes, still breathing heavily. Please, go. He shifted away, sitting up. He reached for her hands and pulled her upright as well. For the sake of your virtue, my lady. She stared at him, panting. Thank you. He grinned at her and pressed a soft kiss to her lips. For kissing you. It was my pleasure, I assure you. You don't need to thank me. She burst into giggles, nestling her head in the crook of his neck. I was thanking you for stopping. Though kissing you was lovely. I hope that I helped to distract you. You did, though now I must find a distraction from you. He pulled away and stood, pressing a kiss to the top of her head before he walked away and left her chambers. She sat there, in the silence, feeling the racing of her heart and the fire in her body. She had always told herself that she would never allow Demon Sand to touch her. Now that she had, she regretted very much that she had waited so long. She could never allow him to touch her again, it had taken all of her willpower to ask him to stop. If he hadn't pulled away, she didn't think that she would have stopped him from doing whatever he wished, nor did she think that she would have entirely minded such a conclusion. She stood and walked to her bedchamber where she removed her gun, her jewels, her shoes, and her hairpins. She slipped a thin sleeping shift over her head before she crawled into the bed. She was exhausted, but her mind still raced. Belatedly, when her body relaxed and her mind slowed, she realized that she finally understood her parents. She understood wanting something so badly that the consequences no longer seemed consequential. She understood the burning desire for something more, some deep and intangible connection with another soul. Lord Eddard Stark watched the slow procession of the king and queen as they entered the throne room. The room had been transformed over the course of the previous day from a feasting hall to its normal state. Every lord and lady in the castle, along with hundreds of courtiers, filled the room, watching the crownless king and queen walk to the foot of the Iron Throne. At the base of the throne, they knelt before the High Septon. He anointed them, blessing them as king and queen of Westeros, swearing them to the protection of the realm. He placed the crown upon Renly's head. As one, the crowds shouted, "Long live the king!" He placed the crown upon Arianne's head. As one, the crowds shouted, "Long live the queen!" They stood, turning to the assembly. "Long live the king, long live the queen!" King Renly Baratheon, the first of his name, walked the steps of the Iron Throne and seated himself. Though he had been king for more than half a year, his coronation sealed his place upon the Iron Throne with all the ceremony of kings. When the coronation was finished, the small council convened. This was the first official meeting of the new small council, and the beginning of the transition between Ned's time as Hand of the King and Mace Tyrell's term of service. Ned's official duties would end within a few days of his departure for Winterfell, though that would not happen for near on a month. He was relieved that his time in King's Landing was drawing to a close. He longed for the peace and calm of Winterfell. He awaited the days when he would only have the affairs of the North to manage. Not that he anticipated total calm, not with all of his children being present in Winterfell. He was glad that Cat had grown accustomed to the idea of Ashura's children coming north. He was also glad that he and Cat were speaking once again. He knew that she had yet to truly forgive him, but he was hopeful that their relationship would improve again when they were on their way north. The king and queen both took seats in the small council chamber. A queen taking part in the council was a rarity, but Arianne Martell had demanded the right, and Renly Baratheon had agreed to her position. The rest of the council filled the seats at the table. Ned had never seen or heard of so many serving on the council, though perhaps that was for the best. The new small council contained men from every region of Westeros, except for the Westerlands. Retaining their positions were Varys as Master of Whisperers, Lord Baelish as Master of Coin, and Sir Barristan Selmy as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Newer to their positions were Lord Yohn Royce as Master of Laws, Sir Aemon Estermont as Master of Ships, and Grand Maester Gorman. The new Grand Maester was appointed by the Conclave to replace Grand Maester Pycelle, who was still a prisoner in the Red Keep. The king was considering sending the former Grand Maester to the Wall so that he would pose no threat to his rule. Lord Mace Tyrell was present, learning the ins and outs of his new position. Also present were the 5 advisors to the council, Prince Oberyn Martell, Lord Paxter Redwyne, Sir Mark Piper, Theon Greyjoy, and Small Janumber. The last addition to the council was Sir Jacelyn Bywater, who was appointed by Renly to replace Janos Slynt as the commander of the City Watch. The meeting was long and arduous. Many tedious details regarding the changes within the government needed to be managed. The costs associated with the war needed to be counted and paid. The Lannister prisoners needed to be dispersed so that they were not all concentrated within King's Landing. In the end, only Tyrion, Lancel, and Martin Lannister, along with Myrcella, would remain in the Red Keep. The other assorted Lannister hostages would disperse to various keeps of loyal lords until their releases were ordered. The last issue of the day was Lord Stannis Baratheon. Though he had no possible way to win against the unified forces who were sworn to Renly Baratheon, the second son of Lord Steffon Baratheon refused to bend to his brother, even for the lordship of the Stormlands. The Tyrells would lead the siege of Dragonstone, with the objective of neutralizing the threat of the king's elder brother. Lord Tyrell had a further question to bring up as the discussions dragged on. "What orders does your grace have regarding your niece, the Lady Shireen?" The room fell deathly silent as all eyes fell upon the king. Should any harm befall Shireen, there would be no legitimate heirs of House Baratheon until the queen should birth a child. Ned Stark had never seen the young king look so grim. "Spare her if at all possible," he answered finally. "Though I will hold it against none if she perishes." Mace bowed his head in solemn acknowledgement of the king's words. "Should she survive, your grace, will our request be considered?" Renly stood, clenching his fists briefly before clasping them behind his back. He looked very much like Robert in that moment, full of wrath and fury. "Your request to wed your eldest son to my niece is denied, again." The position of Hand of the King has been granted to you, as a gesture of goodwill for my choosing to wed Ariane over your daughter Margaery. The marriage alliances were agreed upon by myself, you, and Prince Doran Martell. When this week ends, your daughter will be married to my wife's brother. Still you have the gall to ask, yet again, for my elder brother's daughter as a bride for your son. Do you think me an utter fool? Renly paced the room, his movements watched by everyone in the chamber. Let me be very clear, Lord Tyrell, I have no intentions of fostering threats against my rule. Already I am honoring my late brother Robert's desire for his children to be cared for by having Lord Varys track them down and place them in more comfortable positions. Only 2 of his children are acknowledged, and I intend to keep Edric Storm as Robert's only publicly acknowledged bastard. Had my brother been more sensible, he would have left no bastards and several true heirs. As it stands, the crown will pass to my future children with Ariane. Should Shireen survive the assault on Dragonstone, she will become a ward of the crown, for me to deal with as I see fit and in my time. Seeking to further your own positions with marriages to the children of my elder brothers could be seen as an act of treason. He looked to them all, smiling briefly. I owe my crown to you, good men of the realm. While I consider all of you to be honorable and true, I also know that power is a temptation for some. Should I have the misfortune of hearing whispers of treason, and should such unfortunate rumors be proved true, the headsman will be forced to do his duty. Ned Stark murmured his agreement with the rest of the room, but his heart rested uneasily, as it had for many months. He had given Renly Baratheon the crown and the kingdom. He had convinced himself that there had been no other choice, and while that had been true, he still felt the weight of guilt from his choice. Stannis Baratheon and his daughter didn't deserve death for the treason of other men, Ned included. Underscore 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 underscore. On the 4th day of the festival week, all the people of the Red Keep gathered themselves in the throne room to witness the knighting of 200 young men. The king and his queen, along with the 3 men of the Kingsguard, and the small council stood at the front of the room. Before them were the men who were being knighted, each of them freshly anointed in the September of Baelor. Now they would be sworn to knighthood by the knight who had decided that they were worthy of the honor. Sansa Stark stood beside her mother and brother throughout the ceremony. Arya had abandoned them to stand with Aelys and Lucas. From where they stood, Sansa could see her half-brothers and their cousin, Lord Edric Dane. They were each to be knighted by a different man, Edric by Lord Beric, Arthur by Prince Oberyn, and Jon by King Renly. She thought that Robb should be knighted for his valor in battle, but her parents had both reminded her that knights were rare in the north and that Robb would have far greater honors as the heir of Winterfell. She enjoyed watching the ceremony, seeing the men all being sworn to knighthood by 50 or so lords and knights from the various kingdoms. She hoped that they would all grow to be true men of valor and honor as knights should be. Later, they would move to the outer courtyard of the castle where a competition would be held for the 4 open positions of the Kingsguard. Only 20 men would compete for the positions, all of them already approved by the king. The king's personal guard would reduce from 12 to 5 when his Kingsguard was completed. She applauded with the crowds when the men were finished with the ceremony and the king announced that the men were now all knights of the realm. There was a feast afterward, held in the Middle Bailey. Table after table was arranged for the myriad of denizens in the castle to celebrate. More than 1,000 guests were at the tables, moving freely and laughing gaily. Sansa believed that there were more guests at this feast than had been present for the king's wedding feast and coronation feast earlier in the week. She was right on that matter, for this day's festivities were funded by many of the houses of the realm to honor the new knights. Table after table held fruits, pastries, pies, soups, stews, fish, crustaceans, and breads. In the center of the courtyard, a vast fire pit had been constructed and the cooks turned spits which held the carcasses of several aurochs, goats, fowl, boar, and stags. The aromas were extravagant, luscious. They would sup before the competition and return again after the new Kingsguard were chosen. This being the 3rd feast of the week, it was nice that the celebration was more relaxed. The revelers mingled between the tables while musicians played, though their tunes were often drowned out by laughter and conversation. Sansa was invited to join the ladies with Queen Orianne. She seated herself between Arya and Alysanne. Also at the table were Obera, Tyan, and Elia Sand, Lady Silver Santiga, Ladies Jane and Jenlyn Fowler, Lady Jane Lady Bright, Lady Margaret Tyrell, Lady Leonette Fossoe, and several other young women from the Reach, Riverlands, Stormlands, and Vale. It was an honor to sit with the Queen and her ladies. For a change, even Arya didn't seem to mind her position, perhaps because she liked the Dornish Queen and her cousins. As they dined, Lady Leonette approached Alis and spoke softly to her for a few moments. Alis seemed to agree with whatever Leonette had said, and the two excused themselves from the table. Sansa wondered what it was that her half-sister and Sir Garland Tyrell's wife had been talking about. Underscore 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 underscore. Alysanne Sand followed Lady Leonette Fossoe, contemplating her words. Apparently her brother Brian Fossoe, the new Lord of Cider Hall, had taken an interest in her during the various festivities and wanted to speak with her. She recalled dancing with him at the wedding feast, 3 times. He was in his mid-20s, and possessed a nice smile, and warm hazel eyes. They walked to him, across the courtyard where he was seated with various lords and knights of the Reach. Leonette bade her wait a few paces away while she walked to fetch her brother. Alysanne's attention strayed to the courtyard as she waited for Leonette and her brother to return. She saw Sir Demon Sand with some of the Dornishmen, and her eyes stayed on him for a while. She thought of their kisses and felt herself grow warm. She wouldn't mind kissing him again. Mistress Alysanne. A voice beside her distracted her thoughts. She turned and smiled at Lord Fossoe as his sister had walked away, leaving them alone. I am glad that you agreed to speak with me. Shall we walk? He offered her his arm, which she accepted. I was intrigued by your interest, my lord, and therefore felt that I could not refuse to speak with you. I am certain that I am not the only lord who has taken interest in you. Indeed, my mother and father have both mentioned discreet inquiries about me. I am flattered that you wished to speak with me yourself. They were walking toward the edge of the yard, toward the Godswood. I wished to speak with you first, to see if our interests align. She cocked her head, amused. And what particular interests are those? I wonder what you desire in your future. She contemplated his words as they entered the Godswood, formulating an answer. Truth be told, I am uncertain of my future. I know that I shall be visiting Winterfell at my father's request, afterward I do not know what I shall do. My brother John will be establishing himself here in King's Landing. My mother will be here attending the Queen. My father will be at his seat in Winterfell. My cousin, Lord Edric Dane, will likely return to Blackhaven with my Aunt Illyria and Lord Beric Dondarrion until he is of age to rule Starfall. I enjoyed my life at Starfall. I enjoy working with the traders, the spice and cloth merchants who sell their wares. You enjoy business. I do. I learned the rules of trade seated beside my mother as she and our stewards conducted the business of Starfall. I would not mind continuing to work in trade, should the need arise. Though I do hope for a good marriage, to whomever my parents believe is best. Dutiful, wise, and industrious, he mused. He smiled lightly at her. Would you like to be the lady of a noble house? She smiled to herself, casting her gaze downward. I would not mind the responsibility. He stopped, and turned to her. She looked up at him, a small smile on her lips. His gaze was sober but welcoming. My father died in the battle against Lord Tywin Lannister, and since then I have been assuming all the responsibilities of my new position. I am sorry for your loss, my lord. I lost some whom I held dear, though thankfully the gods spared my family. He bowed his head, acknowledging her sentiment. War brings loss to us all. Very soon I will be departing with the fleet to storm Dragonstone so that our king's position will remain secure. I wish you well in that endeavor. I thank you for your well wishes and for your condolences. I suppose that I should speak with you about why I wanted us to talk. Grinning, she answered him. You mentioned wanting to know what I desired in my future and what my interests are. He laughed nervously. I suppose I did. Mistress Alysanne, I would like to seek your hand in marriage, should you be interested. She turned from him, not terribly surprised given the nature of the conversation, but still stunned that a lord would seek her hand in marriage. You should speak with my parents regarding your interest, Lord Fossoe. I intend to, my lady, though first I wished to seek your opinion on the matter. I am flattered by your interest, though I am curious why you would seek the hand of a bastard over that of a true-born noblewoman, including my half-sisters. I have met many noble women from the Vale, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, and many other lands. There are many lovely women in the Seven Kingdoms, yourself amongst them. However, noble-born women tend to be more pretentious than I prefer. She raised a brow. And I as a bastard am humble enough. Unaffected he replied, laughing. You are much more honest and forthright than is common among the women I have known. That, my lord, is because I am Dornish. He laughed again, entertained by her humor. Perhaps you are right. As for your half-sisters, they are young and I wish to marry sooner rather than later. I have also heard murmurings that they will likely be wedded into the north. Is all that happens at these feasts, discussions about who will marry whom? Some of the time, yes. Other times, we discuss war, or affairs of the heart, or running our holdings. War, romance, and business, the things which rule our world. Indeed. I also must confess, I was further encouraged to ask for your hand after making a few inquiries about you. You have a good reputation by all accounts and seem to have developed strong relationships with your father's true-born children. Ah, there it is. A good relationship with my half-brothers and half-sisters is hoped to carry on into the future so that any marriage I have might be used to build alliances via their marriages. I assume it helps that my brother has married the Queen's cousin. He hung his head, seeming somewhat embarrassed. I will not deny the truth in what you have said. She pressed her lips together, still considering his offer. You are within your rights to make a formal request to my parents, and I shall consider your offer. He reached for her hand, and drew it to his lips. I shall do so, my lady, and I shall hope for your answer to be a favorable one. He kissed her hand, and then allowed her to withdraw it to herself. Would you desire to continue talking with me in the gardens? I am not opposed to your company, my lord, she replied cordially, and allowed him to take her by the arm again as they walked in the Godswood. They spoke for some time as they followed the paths. He was a pleasant companion, affable and polite. While he wasn't overly handsome or charming, she found herself seriously contemplating his offer. At war with her consideration of his offer of marriage were her quite recent memories of kisses shared in the dead of night with Sir Demon Sand. She knew that nothing could come of an interest in the bastard of God's grace, but she couldn't deny wanting to share at least one more kiss with him. They were seated on a bench near the heart tree when Robb, Arthur, and Tyen found them, each surveying them with interest. Alis grinned at them, knowing that they had appeared to ensure her well-being. Lord Fossoe, may I introduce my half-brother Robb, the heir of Winterfell, my brother Arthur, who was knighted today, and my good sister Tyen Sand, daughter of Prince Oberyn Martell. The Lord of Cider Hall stood and greeted each of them in turn. It is a pleasure to meet you, I was having a delightful conversation with your sister. He turned back to face Alysanne and bowed politely to her. If you will excuse me, my lady, I will take my leave. As you will, she replied, smiling lightly. She watched him walk away for some moments before looking to her family, each of whom was considering her with great curiosity. Tyen seated herself beside Alis, her head titled to the side. What did the Lord of Red Apples want? Alis looked between the three, still puzzling over the conversation she had been having with him. He asked if I would consider marrying him. What? They each asked in quick succession. Arthur looked in the direction that Lord Brian had walked. Did you speak with him much during one of the feasts? No, she replied. We danced 3 or so times at the King and Queen's wedding, but we spoke at length only today. He has admitted that he is seeking a good alliance and that he found me interesting. Robb laughed, shaking his head. And for him a good alliance is you, a woman with ties to multiple regions. Alis gave him a somewhat scornful smile. You are my brother, heir to Winterfell and second in line to the seat of Riverrun. Tyen is married to Jon and cousin to the Queen. Jon is fast on his way to becoming one of the King's dearest friends. I'm a useful tool, and he knows it well. Arthur moved closer, concerned. What did you tell him? I told him that I would consider his offer and that if he truly wishes to marry me that he must speak with my parents. Does that satisfy the three of you? They all agreed, somewhat grudgingly, that they were content with what she had told them. She stood, not particularly in the mood to watch the knights compete for the 4 spots in the Kingsguard. I want to go into the city. Care to come with me? All three grinned, though Rob seemed the most hesitant. We don't have permission. If we don't ask for permission, then we can't be told no, she replied. Tyen giggled beside her. The two of you have fought in a war, what could your parents possibly have against a few hours spent within the confines of King's Landing? I'm ready to go, Arthur said. Alysanne, Tyen, and Arthur looked to Rob, challenging him with just a look. He relented quickly enough. I'll come. A few moments later, they made their way out of the Godswood and to the stables so that they could ride into the city, away from the fanfare of court and the festivals of the day. Underscore 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 underscore. Sir John Sand stood behind the king and queen as the 20 men seeking a position in the Kingsguard entered the field. They would first compete against one another and the winners would face off against the 3 current members of the Kingsguard. Most of the competitors were already in service to the king in one capacity or another, a few others were allowed to compete based on their merits as swordsmen and their reputations. John saw Arianne shift uncomfortably in her seat as Sir Demon Sand walked amongst the competitors, his own name in contention for a position. John knew that Sir Demon had a history with Queen Arianne, many in Dorne knew that he had asked for her hand in marriage when they were younger. John looked at other Dornish in the crowds and could see some who watched him with discomfort. He could see others who likely knew nothing, cheering and raving for him, for a Knight of Dorne, to win a position on the Kingsguard. For his own part, John didn't know if Sir Demon's desire to join the Kingsguard was good or bad. To be sure, Sir Demon would protect the Queen at all costs, but would he do the same for the King? He was a good fighter, John knew, from the times they had sparred and from the reputation he had in Dorne. Demon won his first matches with ease, besting Sir Parman Crane, and earning a place in the final rounds of the competition. Sir Demon Sand was the last to face off against the Kingsguard. Lord Bryce Caron, Sir Robar Royce, and Sir Guyard Morrigan had each won a place in the Kingsguard, and would be sworn to the King's service at the end of the competition. If Sir Demon won against Sir Barristan Selmy, the King would choose between Demon and Sir Imran Kewey for the last position of the guard. They stepped into the fighting pen, armed for the contest. Sir Barristan Selmy garbed in the white of the Kingsguard and Sir Demon Sand in relatively plain steel. They walked toward the King and Queen, bowing respectfully. Then they drew their swords, saluting one another, and then they paced to the opposite ends of the field. The men circled one another from a distance, observing one another. Both men were sluggish, showing signs of fatigue from the matches they had already fought that day. John was amazed at the elderly knight's stamina, he seemed more alert than Demon. With cautious steps they drew nearer. Neither of them overconfident. Each waiting for the other to make the first move. When they were near enough for their swords to touch, Demon was the one to strike first. His movement was quick, but Barristan deflected his opponent with ease. Demon sidestepped, dodging Selmy's blade. He thrust his own blade forward, metal clanging against metal as the swords met. Parry, thrust, sidestep. The men moved on the field with ferocity. The steel on steel echoed across the courtyard. Sir Barristan surged forward, battering Demon, pushing the younger knight backward on the defensive. Arianne shifted in her seat, pushing herself upright, clutching her hands together. Her jaw clenched, as she watched her former lover be driven backward. Demon regained the advantage with a well-placed strike, earning himself a few moments on the offense, pushing the Kingsguard back. The crowds cheered, some shouting for Demon and some for Barristan. It wasn't long before Sir Barristan struck again, with force and fury. He drove Demon back, and then drove him to his knees. Upon the ground, with a sword to his head, the young man yielded. The king stood, ordering the men to approach. Sir Barristan extended his arm to Demon, and the younger man accepted his assistance in standing. The walk toward the platform stood before the king, as did the other men who had competed that day. You have all fought well, good sirs, I am honored by your desire to swear yourselves to my service for life. Step forward, Sir Demon Sand of God's Grace and Sir Iman Cui of Sun House. The men took a few steps closer, separating them from the rest of the knights. You have both fought valiantly. Sir Iman, you have served me well in my personal guard these many months. While I am pleased by your desire to make a further commitment to the realm by serving in the King's Guard, I would have you remain in my personal guard. Edric Dane's cousin seemed downcast, but he bowed humbly to the king and spoke his thanks before stepping away, leaving Demon Sand alone on the steps to the platform. Sir Demon Sand, the king said, I have seen your skills in battle and have heard many tales of you, and of your loyalty to my queen. Demon's eyes widened, but he otherwise reined in his emotions. I believe that it is important to know how far a man would go to defend and protect his king and his queen, and I believe that you would make an excellent addition to the King's Guard. Demon fell to one knee, in gratitude and submission to the king. He looked up, his eyes resting upon Ariane before turning to the king. I pledge my life to serve you, my liege. Renly Baratheon smiled at Sir Demon, approving, before he turned his face to the rest of the knights. He called forward his Kingsguard, Lord Commander Barristan Selmy, Sir Preston Greenfield, Sir Aris O'Kurt, Sir Robar Royce, Sir Guyard Moraigen, Sir Bryce Caron, and Sir Demon Sand. The 7 knights knelt before the king. They proceeded to swear their oaths of service, 4 of them for the first time. Jon watched with fascination, wondering what it would be like to swear his life from now until death to the service of an order. He couldn't imagine a life where he could never marry, never love, only serve. Though he doubted that Demon joined simply out of a desire to serve the king honorably. He knew that Demon loved Ariane, and from the king's comments, Renly Baratheon seemed to know something of it as well. For the first time in her life, Ashura Dane walked into the Tower of the Hand. She and Alis were entering the tower to discuss the girl's future. One of the attendants escorted them up to the Hand Solar, where Ned awaited them. She could see the disdain of the guards and servants they passed. Ashura was not welcome in this place. Ned was seated behind his desk when they entered his solar. He stood to greet them, kissing their cheeks in the Dornish fashion. They sat together on the cushioned chairs, sipping sweet wine while they discussed the proposals which had been made regarding Alysanne. There have been 3 proposals for your hand in marriage, Ned told Alysanne when they settled. And many more inquiries, Ashura added, not wishing for her daughter to be disappointed. Alis seemed ambivalent. Who are the proposals from? One of the Freys made an offer, Ashura answered. Though that one isn't worth a moment's consideration. Wrinkling her nose, Alis responded. Have I even spoken to a Frey? Ned laughed. Around a dozen, I'd say. Lord Walder has more children, grandchildren, and various other relations than anyone else in the kingdoms. I do agree with your mother, the offer is beneath our consideration. Sir Gerald Dane also made an offer. He cannot have her. Ashura was out of her seat as the words left her mouth, startling both Ned and their daughter. Why are you so vehemently opposed to him, my lady? Ashura sat, still seething. Sir Gerald has been attempting to gain a foothold at Starfall for years. We feared that he might harm Edric in the battle against Lord Tywine. If Alis were to marry him, I fear that nothing would prevent him from attempting a more forceful coup of Starfall. Mine own reputation, and Edric still being a child, have considerably weakened our position. He wouldn't win a coup, Alis said. Many are far too loyal. Still, I would not assent to such a match. I assume that the third is from Lord Fossoe. It is, Ned replied. I have spoken with him at some length regarding his interest in you. While I am cautious of him, he seems sincere in his interests. He has been quite upfront about his interest in you for both political and personal reasons. Alysanne pressed her lips tightly together. Is his the best offer that I shall have? Ashura tilted her head to the side, concerned. Do you dislike him? She shook her head. No, he is quite kind. We spoke and danced at Prince Quentin's wedding to the Lady Margaery. I had wished. Perhaps I am still young and foolish, but I had wished to marry for love. While Lord Brian is kind, I do not love him. Moreover, should I be wedded to him, I will be bound to Cider Hall. She looked at her father, despairing. I have only just been able to spend time with you, and my half-sisters and half-brother. If I am bound to the south, shall I ever see you or them again? Ned's solemn face grew sad. It would be difficult, though not impossible. Your brothers and sisters would likely be able to see you more often than I, should their duties and yours allow it. With hunched tears in her eyes, Alysanne stood and walked to a window of the solar. Ashura watched her daughter, her heart breaking. She knew that one day her children would all need places of their own. Still, it seemed too soon. Ashura knew the pain of being separated from family, and did not wish it upon her daughter, no matter how inevitable it was. It is the way of all women, that we must be sent away when wed, Ashura told her daughter. Sweeterling, it is unlikely that you shall get a better offer. Alis turned, tear-stained eyes narrowed upon her. Because I am a bastard, and he is a lord, she said simply. I assume no other inquiries were made by so high a noble. No, Ned replied. Some for second and third sons, all of good houses, but Lord Fossoe is the highest noble who inquired about you. I do agree with your mother, this may be the best offer for your hand. Alis shut her eyes briefly, breathing deep. When she opened them again, she had a small smile on her lips. Do you think that the match will benefit our families? Ashura and Ned looked at one another briefly. She nodded for him to speak first. Having family with ties to House Tyrell can only help House Stark. Illyria and I believe that it could be good for trade between the Reach and Starfall. Alysanne paced the room briefly, threading her hands together. When she turned back to them, she seemed resigned. You may tell Lord Fossoe that I accept his proposal. I am certain that when all negotiations are completed by you and him, that I will be told. When Ashura and Ned agreed with her statement, Alis feigned a smile. Now that we are done, may I be excused? Of course, Ashura said gently. Ned agreed with a nod of the head, a sad smile on his lips. Alis left them with a polite half-bow of her head. When they were alone, Ashura drained her cup of wine and sighed. Our little girl is all grown up now. Ned looked to the closed door. I wish that I could offer her more. More than what? You have seen to her well-being with gold and now with helping negotiate a good match for her. It is everything that you promised for her when you first saw her. He seemed surprised by her words. I had nearly forgotten that promise in word, though not in deed. I hope that she will find happiness with this match. First he needs to survive the siege of Dragonstone. He stared at the goblet in his hand as darkness clouded his face. From last report, very few lords still remain with Lord Stannis at Dragonstone. At this point, they have all been driven within the walls of Dragonstone with part of our armies waiting outside their walls. When the fleet launches, they should face little resistance, though besieging the fortress will still be difficult. This is not the first siege which Lord Stannis has faced, though the circumstances are very different this time. Sir Garland Tyrell and Lord Brian Fossoe will be two leaders of the assault, though I doubt they'll be close enough to be greatly at risk. Duty often holds no joys, Ned, she offered as a token of sympathy. She could see that the battle against Stannis Baratheon grieved him. I have known that for many long years, he replied. I will be glad to be rid of this city and back in Winterfell. She couldn't keep the sadness out of her voice. Then I shall be alone for over a year. And I shall likely never see you again, she thought to herself. She internally berated herself for thinking that she would miss Ned Stark. He was the father of her children, nothing more. I am certain that Her Grace, the Queen, will keep you quite busy. I have no doubts of that, Ashura agreed. Still, I will miss the children. I promise to keep them safe and sound while they are in my care. I am certain that you will. I have seen the love you have for all of the children, and it warms my heart. He favored her with a genuine smile. They are all a delight. You have raised your children well. Thank you. She looked to the door, thinking of Alis. She reminds me of you in many ways. She is so dutiful. He laughed. She reminds me of you, always wearing her heart on her sleeve. Though I do see how dutiful she is, in spite of how spirited she is. Have you found matches for any of the other children? For Lucas, no. For Kat's children, we are seriously considering a match for Robb and another for Sansa. There have only been inquiries about the other children. They are all so young. It seems strange that already plans are made for their futures, and Jon is already wed. Most parents plan their children's futures when they are young, unlike our own fathers. Your father planned for two of his children's futures, betrothals between House Stark and two other great houses. while you and I tried to plan our own future and failed spectacularly. He seemed both sad and amused. 4 well-raised children who are climbing high in the world is not a failure, though our actions have caused pain for many. They sat quietly for a few moments, just looking at one another, reflecting. Eventually, Ashura stood. I trust that you will manage the betrothal contract for our daughter, as you did for John and Arthur. I do believe that it is time that I attend her grace. He stood. Of course. I believe that we are done with everything which needs to be discussed today. They walked to the door of the Solar, where he kissed her hand in parting. Underscore 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 underscore. Alysanne Sand stood on the outer wall of the Red Keep, watching as the fleet departed to wage war against Lord Stannis Baratheon. Her betrothed was on one of those ships. Betrothed, such a strange thought. She still had time before they married, should he live through the siege of Dragonstone, a few years of maidenhood left to her. She had only spoken to him twice since their match had been agreed upon, and both occasions had been rather formal. The next time they were likely to meet would be on the day they wed. She would leave for Winterfell soon, and he would return to Cider Hall via Highgarden once the battle was ended. She watched the white sails as they faded like clouds into the horizon, bearing the crowned stag of House Baratheon, the gold rose of House Tyrell, and a dozen other banners. Though her family was on the side of the king, she couldn't help but feel strange that they were condemning Lord Stannis to die for refusing to bend. He was the elder brother, the heir, and did young Shireen Baratheon mean nothing? Copper for your thoughts. She turned and smiled at Sir Demon Sand, garbed in the white armor and cloak of his position. True to his words, he was holding out a copper, which she accepted. I was wondering if what we are doing is right. What are we doing? Sending a fleet to kill a man for doing nothing other than holding to the established laws of succession. Careful, talk like that could cost you a head, and you do have such a pretty head. Lord Stannis was offered his ancestral seat of Storm's End, which was his by every law of succession. The crown's succession was a matter of dispute, solved by the bigger army winning. It still feels wrong, she murmured. Like accepting a marriage proposal for no reason other than the fact that he happens to be a lord. She glared at him. Lord Brian is a kind man, and I do enjoy talking to him. And kissing him. He grinned at her, the dimples showing on his cheeks. She gaped at him for a moment before regaining her composure. He and I have not had that pleasure yet. And how is life as a man sworn to chastity and honor? He laughed. Sworn to chastity and honor, though many of my sworn brothers have been known to have a companion. Truth be told, thus far, it's boring. Perhaps things will be more entertaining as time goes by. She rolled her eyes. So long as you are not the cause of your position growing more interesting. You sound as bad as Oberyn. Rest assured, I shall not be the cause of any incidents of scandal in the royal court. Besides, Oberyn will kill me if I even look at Arianne improperly. Alysanne burst out laughing. That he will. She became thoughtful. What did your father think of you joining the Kingsguard? I never asked. He was glad that I will be remembered forever, though he told me that I had better ensure I am remembered for good. I must serve with honor and dignity, and not bring disgrace to House Illyrian. I am certain that you will succeed. I am glad of your confidence. I try to be an insufferable optimist. I am well aware of that. She rolled her eyes, annoyed by his smug attitude. And you are just insufferable. You didn't say that when I had you on your back. She glared at him, though she was somewhat amused. You best be careful with what you say, lest my brothers and father hear you. He looked around and shrugged. We are atop the castle walls with nary a soul in sight. He moved so that she was trapped between the wall and him. I could kiss you here and no one would see. She chewed on her lip, the memory of his lips tempting her. She raised her hand and pushed lightly against his chest, her gold betrothal ring glinting in the sun. I am promised to another, Sir Demon, and as such I must decline your scandalous offer. He stepped away with a polite bow. As my lady wishes. He smirked slightly. It is a pity. She tilted her head, confused. What is a pity? It was fun to kiss you. Should your betrothed survive the siege of Dragonstone, I will never have the pleasure again. She narrowed her eyes. Don't speak like that. Like what? That Lord Fossoe might die in battle, or that I shan't kiss you. Both. She rolled her eyes. It is unkind of you to say that he may die, though it is true that he may. It is improper of you to say anything of kissing me. She giggled lightly. That we both enjoyed that fleeting moment. Ah, so you did enjoy our time together. She felt herself flush red. Yes, she said shortly. Now would you kindly stop? He bowed politely, laughing. As you wish. As his laughter subsided, he held out his hand to her. May I escort you from here? You may, she agreed, accepting his hand and walking with him away from the view of the bay. Underscore 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 underscore. Several days after the fleet left for Dragonstone, Tien Sand joined her cousin, the Queen, as she paid her first official visit to the hostage Myrcella Hill. They waited in the gardens while the girl was brought to them. A table had been prepared with iced drinks, cakes, cheese, and fruits. They talked as they lounged, awaiting the arrival of the young girl. The weeks had passed so swiftly since they departed from Sunspear, bringing so many changes to their lives that it was dizzying. To think that a year ago she and Ariane had been unwed, happily doing as they pleased. Now they and Prince Quentin were all married and settling into new positions. Quentin seemed happy with Lady Margaery when they left. They did, Ariane replied. Margaery is a sweet girl, though she seems strong enough for Dawn. Only time will tell how well she will do. Tien laughed. A Tyrell and a Martell wedded. I never thought we would see that day. Need makes for strange bedfellows. Tien considered her cousin carefully. How are you and the king faring? Ariane looked away, forcing a smile. We are doing well. Even with his grace publicly insinuating that you were overly well acquainted with Demon. The queen's hands curled into tight fists, though her voice remained controlled. We are aware of one another's past indiscretions. We are committed to the future of Westeros and will cooperate to bring heirs into the world. Oh sweeterling, Tien whispered. Don't fret over me, she replied, reaching across the table to grasp Tien's hand. I have always been bound to duty. I am the most important woman in Westeros now. Mine is to lead the kingdom as Renly's queen, to bear his heirs, and to raise them well. It was never for me to know love such as you know. I wish that you could. A faint, somewhat bitter, smile flitted across her lips. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. Indeed. There was little else that Tien could think to say. I do have some good news. Ariane's eyes brightened, along with her smile. Oh, do tell. My mother has sent word that she will be coming to visit, though I suspect that you will be on your way to Winterfell by the time she arrives. That is wonderful to hear. I will very likely be gone by then, as you say. I know that Lord Stark intends to depart as soon as word arrives from the fleet at Dragonstone. Jon is on leave from his duties beginning tomorrow when we depart to visit his lands. I am certain that your time alone with Jon will be sweet. The time spent in the north with the Starks should prove interesting if nothing else. Tien giggled. It will be an adventure, to be sure. Oh look, she's here. Walking toward them was little Myrcella, led and followed by guards. She was a pretty young thing, though sad. Her hair hung in golden ringlets around her delicate face, and her eyes were deep green. She seemed somewhat dazed by her surroundings, causing Tien to wonder when the girl had last been outside. Ariane stood and walked to the girl, motioning for the guards to leave. Myrcella curtsied respectfully to Ariane when they stood alone. Your Grace, she said. It is a pleasure to meet you, Myrcella, the queen greeted. Come, join us. The girl followed Ariane back to the table, where they sat. This is my cousin, Tien Sand. Hello Myrcella, it is a pleasure to meet you. The girl smiled politely. Thank you. I am glad to meet both of you. I am pleased to host you, Ariane said. I have heard so many lovely things about you and am happy to say that from this day forth, you will be my ward. Very soon, you will be permitted to spend more time with myself and my cousins, and eventually you will be allowed to join my ladies in waiting. What do you think of that? It would be an honor, Your Grace, Myrcella replied. Though the girl was polite, there was a hollowness in her voice. Tien favored the girl with her sweetest smile, pitying her. You must still be reeling from all of your losses, aren't you? Myrcella's lips trembled and her eyes filled with unshed tears. I miss my family. I know, in a way, how you feel, Tien replied. My sister Nymeria died in the battle against your grandfather. I always confided in her. Tommen and I would talk to each other about everything. Her eyes clenched shut shortly before she wiped at them with her hands. When she opened her eyes again, she seemed to be the saddest girl in the world. While I know that no one can replace mother, father, or sibling, 2 of my half-sisters are quite close in age to you. They can grow to be your friends. Would you like that? Myrcella looked between Tien and Ariane. If that is your wish. Ariane let out a light, sympathetic laugh. Sweeterling, my desire for you is that you will grow into a lovely young woman. I will oversee your education, bringing you tutors who will cultivate in you the skills needed for your station. I will assign your attendants and guards. And one day, when you are a woman grown, you will wed. Do you know of your betrothal? She nodded. I am to wed one of Lord Stark's bastard sons. You will, Tien said agreeably. I am wedded to Jon, the eldest of Lord Stark's bastard sons, and you will be wed to Arthur, the next eldest. We will be family. Pensive, Myrcella asked, does Arthur not wish to meet me? Arthur is a young man of 5 and 10, Ariane replied. At the moment, a girl of your age holds little interest for him. Though reluctant, Myrcella agreed with the queen. They soon began eating, nibbling on the varieties of food while sipping iced honeymilk and sweet mint in lime water. While it was all appealing to the eyes, more than a bite of any of it turned Tien's stomach. Eventually she gave up on trying to eat, resigning herself to sipping the mint lime water. When they were finished, and Myrcella departed with her escort, Tien noticed that Ariane was watching her with suspicion. What's wrong? You scarcely touched the food. As of late, most food makes me nauseous. She looked up at her cousin, an irrepressible smile spreading across her lips. Ariane's eyes went wide. Are you with child? Giggling, Tien nodded her head in affirmation. Ariane stood, rushing to her cousin, and wrapped her in a tight embrace. Oh, that's wonderful. Have you told Jon? No, not yet. I want to tell him when we are visiting his lands, so that it is special and private. I also wanted to wait, just to be certain that I am pregnant. Ariane gave her a friendly kiss. Oh sweeterling, I am so happy for you. Thank you. I hope that soon you two may be with child so that our babes may grow together as we did. Wouldn't that be lovely? Smiling, Ariane couldn't help but agree. It would be perfect. Underscore 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 underscore. A gentle mist fell the entire ride from King's Landing to Severin Hall, the castle which was now the home of Sir Jon Sand. Thankfully, the castle was a rather short ride from King's Landing, 2 full days of riding south and east. The castle rose steadily before them on a hill, peaking above the tall trees of the Kingswood. It was surrounded by a moat, formed by a diversion of the Severin River. The river itself was a tributary to the Wentwater River, making its way eventually to Blackwater Bay. They crossed an arched stone bridge over the moat which led up the hill upon which the relatively small castle was built. The wide parapets of the structure provided a strong defense against any potential foes. The pale stone of the castle seemed dull and dreary due to the greyness of the day. The castle was an L-shaped structure with 3 taller towers, and a circular keep at one end of the L. There were well-maintained lawns and gardens surrounding the entire structure, within the curtain walls. The gate was opened to them as they rode their horses along the stony path which led to the outer bailey, beside the stables. A line of servants awaited them, standing straight and still in the light rain. The herald Jon had sent ahead of them had apparently been heeded. Jon dismounted first, close to the residence of his castle. He held the reins of his mount in hand, smiling easily, wondering how they would perceive him. A man stepped forward, old and grey, with a large nose and small eyes. He motioned for some of the men to assist the others in John's company with dismounting. "My lord," the man said in greeting. "May I assume that you are Sir John Sand?" "My lord," John marveled at the title, unable to wrap his mind around the notion that in this place he would be called lord. He heard Tyen and Arthur stifle their laughter at his being called lord. "Yes, I am Sir John. I presume that the messenger arrived." "He did, as did the ravens from his grace, King Renly. We have prepared rooms for yourself and your guests, my lord. As for myself, I am Dale, steward of Severin Hall." He turned to the line of servants and said their names and positions in quick succession. John feared that he wouldn't remember a single one. "Thank you, Dale," John replied. He turned to his wife and sister who were now standing close behind him. "This is my wife, Tyen, daughter of Prince Oberyn Martell." Dale bowed to her. "A pleasure to meet you, my lady." It was John's turn to stifle a laugh as Tyen now appeared to be perplexed by the courtesy title. Here she was a lady, while everywhere else she was merely a bastard. "Thank you," she replied sweetly. John turned next to his brother. While the plan had initially been for John and Tyen to travel to his lands alone, save for a small escort, he had granted Arthur's request to accompany them, after extracting a promise that he wouldn't be a bother to them. "This is my brother, Sir Arthur Sand." Dale bowed again. "A pleasure, sir." John, his wife, and his brother looked uncomfortably at one another and at the people in the yard. The castle servants and the attendants who had accompanied them seemed to know their duties, unloading the horses and afterward leading them to the stables. It was Dale who assisted them. "My lord, would you like to be shown around the property or to your rooms so that you might rest and change out of your wet clothes?" John looked to Tyen. She had been easily tired of late. "What do you say, my lady?" "I should like to rest." She smiled at him. "However, I suppose that we could be shown some of the property while we are on the way to our rooms." They were all agree with that idea, and so the steward led them toward the entrance of Severin Hall, with John beside him. Tyen trailed quite close to them while Arthur and his companion Bella followed at a slight distance, observing their surroundings. Dale told them the history of the castle and its former residents as they walked. The castle had been built some years after Aegon's conquest by a minor noble house who had been granted the lands as a gift from the crown. The castle was built over the course of 10 years, though the various owners had built onto it over the centuries. Severin Hall had passed through several families over the years, with the previous owner dying during Robert's Rebellion and his heirs being attainted shortly thereafter. Since then, the property had belonged to Renly Baratheon, until now. The castle of Severin Hall was much smaller than Starfall, though it was still a formidable estate. As Dale walked with them, he showed them many rooms, the kitchens, the great hall, the library, the Maestas Tower, the privies, and finally their chambers. There were many more rooms that they had yet to see, the pantry, buttery, larder, gatehouse, small September, storerooms, cellars, guest rooms, and many other rooms. He left them in the solar, where bread, wine, and cheese had already been laid out for them. They sat and ate while the servants continued to bring their chests to their rooms. John smiled stupidly at his brother and wife. This was his home, his own castle. He laughed to himself, causing his companions to look at him curiously. Arthur spoke first. "What is so funny?" "Thinking that all of this mine, and ours. A place where we and Mother may all live. You can still own a shop in King's Landing if you desire and also live here. You and Mother and Lucas and Tyen's sisters would all be able to have rooms here and we would still have room for more guests. We could host all of our brothers and sisters and friends." Arthur and Tyen joined in his laughter while Bella smiled politely. Whatever affections Arthur and Bella shared, she was not and could never be family. Tyen slipped her hand in his and squeezed, her normally reserved public facade stripped away, revealing an expression of pure joy. "This is wonderful." She looked around, seeing that the various servants had left. "We should all change from our wet travel clothes." They agreed with her suggestion and went to their rooms to change from their damp riding clothes into dry, fresh clothing. When they were drier, John and Tyen rested upon the feather mattress of his bed, content to hold one another and take in their surroundings. The room was large, with 5 tall windows along one wall which would illumine the entire room on a sunny day. For the moment, the room was mainly illumined by the light of 3 candelabras and the large fireplace. 3 tapestries hung on the wall opposite the windows, depicting young men and women celebrating a wedding. The walls and ceiling were carved with a pattern of squares and leaves. The wardrobe and chests in the room were dark walnut, carved and painted with vines and roses. She curled against him, resting her head beneath his chin while he held her. "Are you happy?" He held her hand, slipping his fingers between hers. "More than I can ever remember. I have more than I ever desired."